Hey everybody, and welcome back to Ready Steady Podcast. This is a podcast about board games, and I'm joined by Barry as usual.
Hello, 'tis I.
And we're going to be talking through the board game news that has come to our attention, things that are incredibly important and vital for you to know about. And then we'll be moving on to the games that we've been playing and what we thought about them.
Very good, very nice.
So I'm going to be jumping straight into just a little bit of self-promotion here. I know, please indulge me. But Zombie Horde has just launched on GameFound. It's a board game about zombies. If you've ever seen the film World War Z, there are visuals that it has in common with that film, although I don't know if I would describe it as the board game of the movie, but it is a board game about a zombie horde, and you are a cooperative team of survivors fending off the zombies and trying to find a cure for whatever is creating the living dead. And this was designed by Filippo Chirico, and it's been brought to crowdfunding by Darkgate Games, who've had a number of other successful crowdfunding endeavors. So Michael and I were sponsored to do a 2-player playthrough, and you can go and find that on the channel.
Very nice. Have you ever read the World War Z book?
I have, and I gotta say, I like the book a lot.
Correct, yes. Unlike the movie, which has nothing to do with the book.
Borderline completely something else entirely.
Yeah, it was an interesting choice, shall we say, to get the rights to the book and then make something that could have been generically any zombie movie.
Yeah, I mean, an interesting choice. But this isn't a podcast about movies. This is although I think we're going to go into movie territory again later on. This is a podcast about board games, and I see that there's an expansion coming for a board game that, I really enjoy.
Yes, that is Ra. So the Knizia game, published by 25th Century Games. But this is a new expansion. So the game is... How old's the game now? Like 20 years? No, am I making that up?
No, it's probably even older than that.
Yep.
No, older than that. Yeah, I reckon it's Ra. I reckon late 90s.
Well, we don't need to argue about anything. We have the world's knowledge at our fingertips. We'll find out later. But regardless, it has survived for a very long time without an expansion. And 25th Century Games have announced that in conjunction with Knizia again, they have now created this expansion, which will come along with the reprint of the Kickstarter version, the Pharaoh edition, which has the very nice components as opposed to the normal retail one, which just has nice components.
Yeah, so Ra was in and out of print for a long, long time with many different editions, which people will fight about whether or not one or the other is better. And 25th Century Games brought it back into print after, I think, what was about 10 years since the previous print run. Could be mistaken, but it was a long time and it was hard to find. So it's excellent that it's back in print. And with the 25th Century Games edition, they did the Pharaoh Deluxe edition as part of the Kickstarter, which effectively offered wooden tiles for all the tiles and metal coins as well. If you did not get the Pharaoh edition, those will be card in your edition. But I think actually the greatest addition in the 25th Century Games production was actually the player boards, which had good player aids for the tiles, because Ra is an auction game. It's all about bidding on these offerings. It's also a push luck game, trying to sort of create the offering of tiles you want and win it before the god Ra decides this auctioning era is over and you will have to live with what you've acquired. Up until the 25th Century Edition version, you'd have to play a number of times to remember what all the tiles did and also whether or not they would go at the end of each era. It's 3 eras long. And whether or not they'd stick with you or go away, and whether they'd be scored during end of era scoring or end of game scoring. So, Tool coming in on that and just giving the game a real sort of user-friendly facelift.
Well, I'll definitely be picking up a copy when it comes back to Kickstarter. But this new expansion adds trader tiles, and it's a little bit more... You care a little bit more about what's on other players' boards. If you have a trader tile, you trigger all the traders, is that right? For extra points?
So there's not been a lot of information officially released about this. They've shown some pictures, some box art, some player boards, and then a thread kicked off on BGG about speculating about what all this might be and how it works. And then somewhere down the thread, Chad Elkins, who works for 25th Century Games, came in and offered up some more insights. So I don't know Chad's role at 25th Century Games. I looked into them, but I couldn't find out more than they work there. So this could be the owner of the company. It could be a media representative. Suffice to say, they work there, and that's about all we know. But they talk about how effectively the expansion adds a new player board, which is going to be a trader's board. It's going to go on top of your existing player board, and it adds new tiles that go into the bag. And when you pull, it sounds like I'm saying traitor. When a trader tile comes out the bag, it goes into the offering, and when the offering's acquired, you will get these goods tokens equal to the number of trader tiles you have. So it's this sort of like self-fulfilling sort of shared resource mechanism, because if you don't collect any trader tiles, whenever someone takes one, you won't get anything. If you allow one player to get all the trader tiles, then every time, then they'll be worthless to you, but incredibly valuable to this other person. I think it's a neat concept. It reminds me a little bit of the existing dilemma with the river and the flood tiles, because there are these river tiles you collect and they stay with you for the whole game, and then you need to switch them on by getting a flood tile, right? So there's this idea that the Nile will flow through the river tiles, and you'll get 1 point for each river tile, but you'll get nothing if you don't have at least one flood. And so when a flood appears, everyone's looking around to see who's got the most river tiles so they can grab it. And the trader tiles is kind of the same thing, but one step further, because, it becomes sort of a collective point scoring thing where everybody's going to be getting points every time someone takes a trader tile, except the people who missed out on them. I think it's neat. I like the idea of it. I don't think Ra needs an expansion. I think it's a great game anyway. But, I'm happy to see more of it. And I will almost certainly pick up this expansion anyway.
Word on the street. Kickstarter won't let you run the exact same Kickstarter twice. So
is that right?
Well, I believe so. So you have to do something slightly different. Now, whether that's what's the word I'm after here? A cynical way of looking at this expansion. Who knows? But you can always ignore it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to play with it.
So it'll be entirely optional.
Another game coming, BackerKit this time, so crowdfunding still, that I noticed and I've played quite a bit of, is One Deck Dungeon. You ever played One Deck Dungeon?
I've not.
You've got 5 Minute Dungeon, right? We played that.
Nope.
You got something along those lines?
I've got
it's a white box.
I've got Mini Rogue. A white box.
Yeah, it was like 5 Minute Dungeon. Something along those lines.
I got Welcome to the Dungeon.
Welcome to the Dungeon, maybe. Who knows? Anyway, it's not the same. So this game by Chris Seslick and published by Asmadi Games. This is the the third expansion to the game, and they're offering a big box solution. Now each game's a small box, and this sits within a larger frame. You can put all 4 into there with the base game included, and the game is quite good, but I prefer it on the app. So in this game you've got your characters. You can play 1 or 2 player. I don't think any of the expansions add any more players, but 1 or 2. And you've basically got your character, and they get a set number of dice to roll of either different colours: yellow, purple, blue, and that's magic, utility, or like rogue powers. Yellow's are strength. There's a couple of wild dice and stuff, but you get to roll the dice and try and overcome obstacles and monsters within the dungeon that you encounter by using those dice. As you progress, you gain additional abilities, which will either give you additional dice or different ways to spend those dice. So your base power might be spend 6 points worth of yellow to do a damage, and then later on you'll get an upgrade where you can spend any value of yellow to do a damage. So as you progress through these 3 levels of the dungeon, you level up and power up as you go. But the most interesting part, I would actually say, is the roguelite element, right? Where you have the opportunity to meet certain objectives every time you complete a dungeon and tick off things that make your character stronger. Now, this is done very well in the app. I've actually not played this mode in real life. Through that, you'll get maybe an additional dice to start, or additional die to start, and additional skills that you can use right off the bat, and that makes going into the harder dungeons more possible. You can do the hard dungeons from your base character, but it becomes easier as you sort of level up your character and go into those harder dungeons. So the previous expansions have added different mechanisms, poison, and like one of the jungle ones, and I forget what else is in there, but I'm not 100% sure what this one adds, but it should be some... If you like the game, it's probably more of the same. The other expansions have been more.
Well, I have not played One Deck Dungeon at all, but I do quite like little dungeon adventure games. I like Mini Rogue a lot, although Mini Rogue has become quite bloated now thanks to 2 additional Kickstarters. But I enjoy the content that's been released for that. So
it is Welcome to the Dungeon that we've played.
It was Welcome to the Dungeon. Yeah. Does One Deck Dungeon require a storage solution?
Not really. Imagine you took all 4 boxes and stacked them up side by side on top of each other. That is the storage solution. The storage solution is for the boxes. It's not for the contents of the boxes.
So it doesn't help speed up setup?
No.
Okay. Well, this seems like a peculiar thing. Were people like asking for it?
Also unclear, but imagine it would now take up a space of like a thin standard size board game. So if you're a vertical storer, this is useful for you.
Is this because people were there was a concept that maybe people were annoyed trying to hunt for 4 little boxes?
Well, I don't know how people were storing them before. So, no, like they're not that small. They're small box, but they're not. You're not going to lose them around the back of something.
I'm envisaging the Mind Bug box.
Yes, comparable. So imagine 4 of them. But now imagine you could put the 4 of them into a window-style box.
Yep, and then you don't have to pick up 4 boxes. You just pick up 1 box.
Yeah,
I can see the utility.
Think of the time saving. Honestly, I can only think it's useful for vertical storers.
So One Deck Dungeon, it's a roguelite, and is it push your luck?
No, you'll always know as you've got to go through 3 levels of dungeon, which you have a limited amount of time to explore each level, and then you must progress or you start taking damage. And you're looking to the varieties where the game is, the amount of different things that you can get by defeating a certain monster or finding a certain treasure or getting a certain ability is where the variety comes in, and you're looking to build your adventurer to sort of your play style. So if you get a couple of abilities that can use blue dice and a couple of abilities that can use yellow dice, a couple of abilities that can use purple dice, and so you've got a good spread, or you can go very specialised on just one colour of dice to do it. But then when you're defeating a monster, you need to roll certain values and for certain colours, and the monster will have a number of boxes that you have to assign dice to defeat it. So you don't have to complete every box to defeat a monster, but normally there'll be a time penalty or a health penalty for not doing it, but there'll be a minimum amount of boxes you have to fill in to kill the monster, and then you get to the boss, and same thing, you'll go through multiple rounds of fighting the boss, where you have to hit some rather large numbers in order to defeat them, and they hit back quite hard. And the different abilities each monster has, it could be remove any ones that were rolled, or you can't re-roll yellow dice or something like that. It is quite fun, but I prefer the app. It's fast, it's easy to track, and you've got like a very perpetual record of all the different characters and where you are with their progression, and you've got a record of, how many times you've beaten a certain boss. There's like 12, 13 more bosses, I'm not sure. And you've just got this list of everything that you've kind of achieved. I
see. Well, speaking of storage solutions, I see we've got another Kickstarter for another storage solution.
Well, this is another game that we've played. Not that we had played One Deck Dungeon, but we had played a dungeon game. This is Barrage Legendary. Nothing terribly legendary about it. There's a couple of new companies in here, but it's just a big box storage solution. So this is Tommaso Battista and Simone Luciani, published by Cranio Creations. And Barrage is how would you describe Barrage?
So Barrage is a heavy Euro game with a lot of competitive player interaction for 1 to 4. It's leaning into that competitive interaction. It's best at 4. And it could be called a worker placement game because you certainly have a pool of workers and you do place them. But it would be, I think, a bit misleading because when we think about worker placement, we tend to think of sort of generally, I think, lighter Euros or more Euros with more passive player interaction, or where the focus is on the timing around the worker placement. Now, the timing in Barrage is hugely consequential.
Yeah.
What you've got are two major elements to it, and one is the worker placement board where you're distributing these workers round to round, and the second is the map. And the map is a series of water flows from the top to the bottom in which we are building dams. So this is set in a sort of post-apocalyptic steampunk future. It's all a bit ambiguous, in which different nations are attempting to generate power from water flow. And so the map is the top of a mountain range, moving horizontally to the bottom of the mountain range through different levels of elevation. And moving through these levels are rivers, which are pooling at different points in different areas. And functionally what you have to do is you have to build a dam to collect water, and then a power station and a conduit to sort of allow the energy from the collected water to be transferred into electrical power. Where it gets crunchy is that in order to build this infrastructure, the 3 different parts of this infrastructure, you need to go through quite a laborious process of resource management and worker placement. And at any point, someone can jump in and build some infrastructure in there that can completely derail your plans. Additionally, the way water works, of course, is that once it's allowed through the dam in order to generate the electricity, it will then flow somewhere else. And every time the water is processed, it will change lanes. So if you think about the board as 4 adjacent vertical lanes, the water can be moved between the 4 lanes horizontally by the process of generating electricity, which can deliver it into someone else's infrastructure. Or, if you're really lucky and savvy and clever, your own infrastructure again. So there's this real argy-bargy for building on the board and trying to take advantage of what other people are doing, or maybe getting in there and eking out some small benefit from it. For example, one of the meanest things you can do is jump into someone's power station dam combo and build the power conduit, which forces them to use your power conduit every time they want to generate electricity, and that forces them to pay you a coin, and also you get a victory point. And that coin, that's a lot. Like 1 coin in this game, it's so much money. It feels really bad.
More than 1 might suggest, yeah.
So, round to round, you're picking actions off of this tableau by placing workers. You get a pool of 12 every round that you distribute, and the actions get progressively more expensive as well. So you put down a couple of workers and you get to do something quite neat, or you can put down 3 or 4 workers and you get to do the same neat thing. So the later you come, the more workers you have to pay, and it gets pretty tight and painful as well. So I love Barrage, Barry. I love it. It's so mean and it's so tight and it's so tense, but it is also like 2.5 hours to 3 hours long at 4 players probably. And it's very easy to screw up in such a way that you will have quite a bad time for the duration of the game.
Yeah, so I think Barrage is actually best thought of as a network or route building game, is kind of how it's kind of lumped in with Nucleum and Brass for comparisons. But it is mean. So after we played, I went away and played a fair bit on Board Game Arena, well, another half dozen plus games, and I did like it, but I didn't love it, and it was in part because it was quite cutthroat for what you had to do. And it always felt like, I'd been building up to this all game, and then suddenly I'm not going to get the water I need because somebody's done something further upstream that they had no business doing. But it's taken away that one extra water you needed to get your power threshold up for the fourth round to get the reward, So
look, here's the thing about Barrage, okay? The foothills are a trap. It's too expensive and the output's not good enough. Either get started on the mountains right away or profit from the foothills for a bit and then go into the mountains. The foothills, the valley, profit from the valley for a bit. The foothills are a total trap and they're not worth it. That's my take.
But anyway, the big box is there, and I think you can probably pick up the expansion and the base game at the same time. The two new companies just add a bit more variety, and so if you like Barrage, which many people do, here's a good opportunity to jump in.
Yeah, so just on the topic of Barrage as well, there's a 2-player map they've released because the game, I think, is not really, it doesn't feel like it's really designed around 2 players. I've not played it at 2, so I can't say for sure. But, they just kind of mark off some worker placement spots, and fundamentally the main map doesn't really change. There's some generic infrastructure that starts out on the board, and I think at 2 players there's more of it. But again, I feel like Barrage is a spatial network building game where players are butting heads and trying to profit off each other and get in each other's way, and without that element, a lot of the dynamism is probably lost. But there is a 2-player map for it that is available that might go some way to addressing those matters.
Barrage Duel.
That's all hypothetical. Yeah, Barrage Duel.
You heard it here first. That's a scoop.
It's not a self-contained game. It's just a map to go with Barrage, I believe.
It's not a self-contained game so far.
So far. But there is the Liege Water expansion, which was a big box expansion that came with the original campaign. And there's also the Egypt map, which adds these little extra tiles, both of which I have played. And I've not been especially enamored with either. Liege Water goes some way to alleviating the stress of the original game because it adds more worker placement spots and these sort of private projects that build up sort of asymmetrical player functionality. So I think Liege Water is probably something you might be interested in if you think that Barrage feels like too mean, or you feel like you're wasting a lot of turns because you can't find the good moves. But I would venture that if that's your position, maybe just play a different game. No, it doesn't need to be for everyone. But Liege Water, I don't know if that's going to fix your issues, and it's sort of more overhead in a game that's already quite long and quite dense. And then Egypt's kind of the same. It adds in these irrigation tiles that you can claim, which give you points and abilities, and it felt like more overhead for a game that didn't need it. That was, it's sort of sitting on the base game, I think, is sitting on the sort of perfect level of like rules overhead and, competitiveness and weight.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it needs any of that other stuff, or I don't think it's for the cost of what that other stuff is adding. I don't think it's worth that cost.
Fair enough. We do have another old game getting a revamp. So imagine if you were as old as Ra, but it's Kickstarter-y, it's Barrage Legendary. Whoa, what a combination. This is Tikal Legend, the 25th anniversary game. So this is a game by Kiesling and Kramer, Michael Kiesling, Wolfgang Kramer, and published by Super Meeple, who I think have only really done... They have published a few of their own games, but I think they're like a French publisher of other games.
Yeah, I've definitely seen something by them in my collection, but I can't remember what it is.
It's out there somewhere. Check the walls. Yeah. But this is a Kickstarter project that's coming and will be fulfilled sometime next year. And Tikal is an action point mechanism game about going through the South American jungles and finding pyramids and tomb raiding, for more of a better word. But you get points depending on what pyramids you find and control by the end of the game. So I've not seen a lot of action point games that work quite the same way. Or really in general now. I don't know if they've fallen out of favour a little as games have evolved over these last 25 years. But basically you can go through the jungle, you've got a number of jeeps, you can spend points moving through the jungle, you uncover the temples, and if you can maintain control of them as other people kind of follow you in, you'll get points from them, and if you can get enough people around there and claim the points from the temple. And I've played both Tikal and Tikal 2, but primarily again on the app. So I've actually never played these in real life. So I don't know what the flow feels like, but the app works very well. It's just not that great a game to my mind. It's okay, right? So Tikal is better than Tikal 2, and Tikal's part of the Masks trilogy. So there's that, there's Java and Mexica. And they're all games designed by Kramer and Kiesling that are in the same sort of South American theme for the most part, I think. And I couldn't really tell you why it's not better than it is, because it functionally everything makes sense, the rules all make sense, and you're worried about what you're doing, you're worried about what your opponent's doing. You've got to plan your moves out. You don't want to get stuck with an action point you can't use because you've got a limited number of them every turn. It's that mini optimization element of your turn, and when do you move out because you know that you're going to lose control of that tempo next turn, and things like that. But it just isn't amazing. So I'd be interested to see if they add anything to this game. As I say, 25 years old, it's 25th anniversary of it. But I only find it so-so. I don't know if you've ever played this or any of the Masks games.
So I haven't actually played Tikal 2 or any of the Mask games, but I had just sort of a similar broader comment on Wolfgang Kramer and Michael Kiesling, because they do a lot of collabs together, and they have individually created astonishingly good games. Of course, Michael Kiesling, most famously, I think now, is Azul and the Azul series. And Wolfgang Kramer, for me, is El Grande, right? Which was a collab with Richard Ulrich. So, to their credit, they've both got excellent designs, but none of their... So I played two of their collabs. I played The Palaces of Carrera when the second edition came out. I think I talked about that on the show, actually. I think we did a played sort of video review of The Palaces of Carrera. And I also played Paris, which was kickstarted by Game Brewer in a fancy big box edition. And I had much the same reaction that you've spoken about to both of those. Perfectly pleasant, nice games. I mean, I don't think I played Paris under the best conditions because I played it at 2, and it felt like it wanted to be more. And The Palaces of Carrera, I played at 4-player and at 3-player, and it was just fine. I wasn't particularly wowed by either, although the Game Brewer Paris sort of fancy edition was gorgeous. I noted a few more of their notable collabs here. Is Porta Nigra, which is generally well considered, although I haven't played it, and also Renature, which again was sort of very popular. That's a more recent one. I think a couple of years ago that came out, and there was a lot of hype around it in my board game group. and it was spoken of quite highly, but I never actually got the chance to play it. And it's just sort of, it's curious to me that given the number of games in their catalog as co-designers, there isn't sort of an Azul or an El Grande, this is the one that they did together that you should definitely try. Which is a pity, but, that's how it is.
Gotcha. I think they were going to team up with Knizia at one point, but then they realised Kramer, Kiesling, Knizia.
Well, that would have been a fun collab just for the alliteration.
Yeah.
I would have been interested to see what they did as well, but...
Yeah, anyway, it's fine. And a bit, so if they modernise it, because I do feel like action point games have not been in favour of recently, but this could be a renaissance.
But is EPOS not basically an action point game?
Very different feel. You're limited in what you can do in EPOS, right? I guess.
But it's kind of like you've got that action track that you fill up every round. So I think it is sort of an action point game, but yeah, I can understand why you would sort of not think of it that way.
It's
is
the
this
same
just
thing,
sort of straight action points, like you've got 4 to spend or something, and you're just spending 4 every round? Is it as simple as that?
It is as simple as that.
Well, there we go. That's a new version of an old classic. What about a new version of a new classic?
So Lord of the Rings Duel. I noticed the rules are up. I've not spent a lot of time with it though, so I did have a cursory look to see what was what, but we have spoken about this. We did get a glimpse at the UK Games Expo this year, and it is a hotly anticipated game to come out. So much like the original Seven Wonders Duel, this is a Antoine Bauza and Bruno Catala collaboration, published by Repos Production, and is a re-implementation of Seven Wonders Duel, the 2-player version of Seven Wonders. And the differences seem a little more stark than I first thought, or what my impression was when I saw the game for the few minutes that I did. But not enough that it's a wildly different game. The drafting element's still there, and the 2-player drafting works quite well with some cards unable to be selected until you've taken cards from the top of them. That's still apparent, but as you collect the different symbols, you'll be able to assign armies to areas on the board, which you'll then either control or you'll be able to compete over. And all the while, the Nazgul are chasing the Fellowship, or particularly the Hobbits, on their way to Mordor. So whilst the core part of the game is the same, the feel of it's slightly different, and actually the third age layout's quite different. But that's not a big thing, I suppose, for the game. Just the shape of the cards and what you can pick and what you can't. But I like Seven Wonders Duel quite a lot. I like Seven Wonders even more, actually. But I'll be picking this up as soon as it is out. Essen, where maybe Mike will bring me back a copy.
I hope we'll be able to get our hands on some.
I've already pre-ordered it. Don't get me one. And speaking of my pre-orders, what's up with Asmodee's Warehouse? I thought it was fixed.
I didn't know that it had a problem.
Oh, I've been bust for weeks. Everything that's come out on the release schedule, just only half seems to get to game stores. I don't know what they're doing. They moved everything, and then apparently it's been back up and running. But where's my copy of Dominion Rising Sun? That's what I want to know.
Have people got it? Have people got that?
No, I don't think it's left the warehouse is the point. It was supposed to come out just last week. I've been playing it though in the digital version.
Yeah, what do you think?
I like it. A lot of people were complaining on the Dominion Reddit that they don't like it, but those people are wrong. So there are a couple of duff cards. Have you seen the new mechanism? The shadow mechanism?
Nope.
Basically, it's a card that when you shuffle goes to the bottom of your deck, and you can play it as if it was in your hand. So I can't remember what the card's called, but basically +2 money, +1 buy. And as long as you've got the action for it, you can play that from the bottom of your deck. Play it from your deck as if it was in your hand. And there's 4 or 5 shadow cards that are like that. And then there's also prophecies, which are sort of events, but when you play a prophecy card, there's some cards that remove trackers from the I forget what it's called. It's like remove sun icons from the prophecy, and once that's off, the prophecy comes to fruition, and that could be good or bad. So whether or not you want to be buying prophecy cards to hasten that along, or whether you want to be avoiding them because you don't want it to trigger, it's kind of the swing of the game. And so if you're playing 2-player, which is really the only way to play Dominion, then maybe you're like, well, actually that's going to hit my opponent worse than me, so I can go in on these cards a little heavier because they're quite good. And they'll be like, no, I don't want I don't want that. I've gone into golds too soon, so when that prophecy hits, it's going to remove all my gold or something like that.
I like Dominion, the app, at 3 players. I don't mind that.
3 players? Ooh, crazy. Girl, you crazy.
But in real life, yeah, the downtime, even at 3, can get pretty... If
everybody knows what they're doing, it's fine, but it's a different game, right? A different player counts.
Absolutely. I'm going to talk about Airecon, because I went to Airecon Northwest. And I'm a big fan of Airecon Harrogate, which is the original Airecon in the big convention center in the center of Harrogate. And it has, when I first started going to Airecon, almost no publisher presence at all. Now Airecon Harrogate has moved across the convention center to the other side, so it's got more space, it is bigger, and it's got a sort of publisher area with more publisher presence, which is fine. I mean, I still think it is primarily an open gaming convention. And perhaps that's also because I tend to go to the UK Games Expo and Essen every year, so really nothing quite compares to those two for publisher presence. In the set of conventions that I attend.
Yes. Gen Con aside.
Yeah, well, Gen Con aside, and of course Gen Con is in the States, which, means that we can't go there and buy games, so why bother? No, but of course, Airecon has spun off into 2 other conventions, Airecon Northwest in Manchester and Airecon West in Telford. And I've not been to the Telford one. I hadn't been to the Manchester one before, but Airecon were very kind to give me a press pass, and so I showed up for Friday and Saturday to play open gaming, and it's a very small convention. Very sort of intimate. There's one open gaming space and an events room and an RPG room. The event was sponsored by Dice Tower, so there were some folks from the Dice Tower there. Z Garcia was there, and they were putting on some events, so that was fun for people who were into that. I spent most of the convention playing games, and I'm largely just going to list them. But I got to play Tribune by Karl-Heinz Schmiel, and this is the Spielworks edition that was published in The Spielworks edition of Tribune was published in 2021. FFG version. We played at 6 players. Tribune is a worker placement game and set collection game set in the ancient Roman Senate. And you are a noble Roman family attempting to become sort of the most powerful person in Rome. And the way you're going to do this is collect cards that relate to different areas of Rome by putting your workers out. And it's one of those worker placement games where we go around the table, everyone places a worker, and then triggers, and then all the actions trigger in order after that, and you get sort of what you got when you placed your workers out. So you're sort of trying to weigh up what your priorities are round to round. And there is one area of the board where you will compete head to head to be the leader of each of these different Roman factions, things like the senators, the gladiators, and the military. And most of your cards and set collection is in order to allow you to take over these different areas. And they're going to change hands a lot, but you want to have at least been in charge of, a number four of the 8 or so over the course of the game. And ideally you want to have a couple under your control in any given round, because they're going to award you benefits, passive benefits for being in charge. But you're also going to get some benefits when you take over them as well. So everyone's placing workers down in this area here and trading in sets of cards to take the control off of other players. It's sort of the core dynamic of the game. And so I've played a lot of Tribune at 5 players, and one of the things I really like about it is that it keeps its length relatively short and sort of plays out even with 5 players in under 2 hours. And at 6 players, you add in a sort of asymmetrical role called the Brutii, which is doing largely the same stuff as everyone else, but has a whole sort of action card selection thing instead of worker placement. And I think that I was playing as that role because I'd played Tribune the most. And I got the impression that it really added to the enjoyment of the game for everyone else because they really had a good time. And, it helps that Tribune's a really good game. Albeit, it is deceptively light. It's quite a light game, despite the fact that it takes quite a lot of work from somebody to get it to the table. It's enormously helpful that I'm there to answer all the questions. And this process is made worse by the fact that the Spielworks one has some real usability issues. They were worse in the FFG version, if you can believe it, but they're still not great in the Spielworks edition. There's one of the tiles is just the iconography means other things on other tiles, and it just doesn't... It's so bad. It's like, I don't know how on earth they messed that tile up so badly. But it's not the first Spielworks game I've seen with poor graphic design and sort of usability issues in that department. So maybe there's a lesson to be learned there for them. But in any case, if you know the game and you've got someone who can answer questions like me, then it's less of an issue. And I got the impression that the Brutii role was quite enjoyable for the players because they weren't sure what sort of events I was going to play for my hand and when I was going to do it and what I was going to sort of compete on. But for me, it was quite difficult to run. And the other thing about the role, I mean, it wasn't difficult to run. Once I got my head around it, it was fine. It was difficult to figure out how to do well with. And I don't know if part of that was because one of the elements of the Brutii, which is, I think, is a thematic element, is that when the Colosseum opens up, they get to take that action for free every round. So the Colosseum is any number of players can go in on it, and then there's a big simultaneous conflict between everyone in the Colosseum. And the Brutii player always counts as being there. And in our game, the Colosseum never opened, so I never even got to do that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that just meant I had like much less to do and I couldn't profit from that. I think that would have been enormously helpful and gone a long way to sort of helping me progress. Having said that, it is ultimately a race game to meet a number of requirements, and I did get 3 out of 4 requirements. So that wasn't too bad.
That doesn't sound like a win to me.
Oh, no, it's not a win. We had a couple of players actually get 4 requirements in the same turn, which means that you go to a rather more complex scoring system, but and they were very close on that too. But everyone enjoyed it, had a really good time. Tribune is a really nice game. We played Inish, Seasons of Inish, which is the expansion. This is designed by Christian Martinez and published by Matago. And Inish, we played at 5, which you can only do with Seasons of Inish. We did not play with the actual Seasons module because it's rubbish. It's not rubbish, okay? It's just like it adds extra overhead round to round, and I don't think it really adds anything. The other players had only played the core game, and we're not super impressed with the Harbors either. I think the Harbors is fine. But the game overall ended rather anticlimactically, and this is possibly partly my fault. But as the most experienced Inish player there, I was pursuing the exploration victory condition, and then one of the other players played this Epic Deeds card that revealed like 4 new territories, and the map just got massive immediately. And then I just won on exploration like 5 rounds in.
Yeah.
Which was quite anticlimactic, and tragically, it was just one of those things where players were looking around the table going, can anyone do anything about this?
Nope.
But I think that, to an extent, Inish is, especially with the We Want a King module from the expansion, short enough that, you're going to have these sorts of learning experiences. When Inish, I guess one of its biggest flaws is that it can be very unpredictable in terms of its length and the kind of experience you're going to have. Sometimes it does just end very abruptly, and sometimes it doesn't. I do think those abrupt sort of ends get less and less noticeable the more experienced players are, and specifically whether they're good at sort of counting and tracking cards. But if you don't know anything about Inish, it's a card drafting, sort of dudes on a map game where you're trying to meet one of 3 victory conditions, and then if you meet one, then you'll check to see who's got the most if you've got 2 or 3. And so everyone's keeping an eye on the board, and round to round you get to take actions from cards that you draft. So there's a round of drafting, and then everyone plays through their hand of cards, and then you see if anyone's won. And it's got this sort of rather unusual element where you can just pass. So the round ends when everybody passes, and usually that's because they've played out all their action cards, but the hand sizes can be inconsistent because they can be made up of Epic Deed cards and what are called advantage cards that you get for owning land in the game. So you can have more actions than other players. And so that inconsistent hand sizes coupled with the ability to pass around or pass a play, an action, means that, sort of biding your time and looking at what other people are doing is quite an important part of the strategy. But it's supposed to come with the risk of, if everybody passes, the round just ends, and then you don't get to use the actions you drafted. And if you made a very sort of specific gamble, or you like the hand you got, then you might not want to pass because you want to make sure you get to do those actions. And of course, with a less experienced group, that risk is less likely to manifest because they're probably just going to be playing their action cards and taking their actions, which is a natural intuition, I think. So, yeah, I do always like Inish, although I was a little sorry that I sort of ended this one so aggressively.
Yeah, it's a good game.
Yep. I mean, it's, but I think that's just sometimes Inish is just inconsistent. So that's Inish. We also played Tammany Hall. Have you played Tammany Hall?
Oh, that rings a bell. Please hold.
So this is the one set in, I believe it's Manhattan Island, but I could be wrong. And it's all about immigration. And you've got these 4 different European groups immigrating to Manhattan. This is designed by David Eckert, and the most recent version was published by Pandasaurus. I can't remember who published the original version, but Pandasaurus, I think, kickstarted a reprint in 2015 or so. I think they've continued to publish it since. I believe it's still relatively acquirable, although I think it's not had a print run for a few years, so it might be a bit tricky to pick up brand new. But it is I guess it's an auctioning game. It's rounds of play. It's best at 5, probably.
Yeah,
it goes up to 5, and wants at least 3. And it is completely an auctioning game, but it's sort of like a 2-layer auctioning game. Because what you've got is this map of Manhattan, which is divided up into regions, and each region is going to be checked for scoring round to round. Not round to round, sorry. At the end of 3 rounds. So you play 3 rounds, and then there's a scoring round, and then you progress the game. And when you check a region, you look to see who's got the most of their, what are called bosses in there. Union bosses? I don't know. Anyway, you're putting these pieces out on your turn. You've got this option of putting one of those out, or you can put 2 out, and they can go to any region, the same region, different regions, whatever. you can put these mob bosses or union bosses out, and then, or instead, you can put out one boss and one immigrant, and there's a pool of immigrants. And when you put out the immigrant, you get a favor token. And that's important because that's what you're going to be using to bid with come the auction round. So once we get to the auction round, we're going through each region and we're checking who has the most union bosses there. And that's your starting position. So you got one, you've got one. You've got three, then you've got three, and you can make up this number by spending those favor tokens that you got for introducing immigrants into Manhattan. And it's blind bids. So everyone secrets some favor tokens into their hand and then reveals them, and you add that to your number of union bosses, and then that's your total value. And you need an absolute majority to win. If there's a tie, then everyone gets kicked out. Either way, if there's a winner, everyone but one of that person's union bosses gets kicked out. There's this sort of nice mechanism as well. But there's this sort of secondary considerations, like you want to try to be winning territories with the most like Irish in them, or the most Germans. It's Irish, Germans, English and Italians. Yeah. And so if you have the most Irish immigrants collectively in your territories, then you get more favor with that group at the end of each of these scoring phases. And that favor is so important. If you have the most territories overall, you also become the mayor. And what's nice about this mechanism is you get a bunch of victory points, but then you have to give everyone else a job, and you can distribute the jobs however you want. But you are sort of keeping an eye on the board. Who's competing for what? What are they going to do? Because as the mayor, you don't get, each of these jobs gives them, every other player, a power. You know, like they become the chief of police. They can take immigrants off the board, or they become the head of the judiciary and they can lock down regions, you know. And so you're looking at the board trying to figure out who you want to give these jobs to, because as the mayor, you don't get a power. You just get 3 points and then you're sad. So it's like, okay, are they going to use these powers to hurt me? Like, what's the most damage they can do? But yeah, really interesting game. Sort of blind bidding, area majority game, high levels of player interaction. I think if you quite like Raw, even though that's not blind bidding, but if you quite like Raw, or if you like Container, to think of a few auction games, you'll probably like this. It's got a real classic feel. I think for a lot of like sort of modern gamers, they'll be looking for sort of more asymmetry in it. But the board escalates quite nicely as more and more migrants are introduced, and there's a sort of ebb and flow of the regions players control and things like that, and players are keeping a big eye on each other's scores. I think, you know, if it was a modern game, there'd probably be a bigger sense of escalation. You know, like there's not. It's 3 scoring rounds, and that's each scoring round's at the end of like the 4th gameplay round. So it's quite a long game, despite the fact that the board state is very dynamic, but it doesn't really escalate very much. But still, a great fun time. We enjoyed Tammany Hall.
Yeah, it's not the game I thought it was. I think I was thinking a 5-minute dungeon. No.
Welcome to the dungeon.
Welcome to the dungeon. One of the two.
So the final game I'll mention here very quickly is Harmonies. I spoke about this on the UKG debrief. This is designed by Johan Benvenuto and published by Libellud. And it is the game of placing discs in your area to make pretty patterns that score points. It's very much in the vein of Cascadia or Calico, if you've played either of those. These sort of pattern building drafting games. And what sets Harmonies apart really is that it's got a great table presence because it's got all these wooden discs and they stack. So you make trees, make mountains, make buildings. Looks nice. Got a little river running through the middle. Looks pretty. And just like those other games, it's got sort of a core scoring conceit. So like buildings score this way, trees score this way, mountains another way, fields and rivers, etc. So everyone's scoring those consistent scoring systems. And then over the course of the game, you're also drafting cards which give you unique scoring considerations. So that's kind of what sets it apart from something like Cascadia, where the cards themselves that set the sort of communal scoring conditions are changed game to game and in different combinations. So there's some variety there, but it's totally communal. Everyone's striving for the same goals, albeit you might not all be pursuing the same cards. You could, ignore the eagles because it's too difficult to visualize, for example, in Cascadia.
Yeah.
What makes Harmonies a bit unique is that you've got those communal scoring conditions, and then you're drafting these cards over the course of the game that will give you different scoring conditions. And I think the sort of core here, so I was really bad at Harmonies at UKG. I lost horribly. I played it async with the patrons. I lost horribly. I played it at Airecon. I lost horribly. And I'd sort of missed this pretty important heuristic that I think is absolutely essential, which is that as you take the cards, what they're going to look at is they're going to look at the different terrain on your board. And if the terrain matches the pattern on the card, you get to put a little cube from the card onto the terrain, unlocking points. If you get all the cubes off the card, i.e. score max points, it goes out of your play area and into a pool of scored cards, which is nice because you can only hold 4 cards at a time. So you're making more room for different cards. I was told when I was playing it at Airecon that scoring 4 cards in addition to your sort of starting card is a good score. And I'd never even managed to score like a card in its entirety. So I was like, all right. But I'd missed this like key here. And this is so silly because I think this was really apparent to like everyone but me. I don't know how I overlooked it. But basically, if I think my instinct was to take cards that all score off of trees. Because I'm like, okay, then I'm making trees and I'm going to be able to score a bunch of points off of the trees because all these cards are looking at trees. But because you have to take a cube and put it on a tree, that's the opposite of what you want to do. Because you're going to be building a little bit of everything, and you can't put more than 1 cube on a tree. So if all your cards want trees, you have to build all the trees, and you're just not going to get them all. So don't do that. Diversify is the name of the game in Harmonies, right? What you really want is cards that are scoring off each different terrain type, and then they want patterns made out of a lot of the same sort of terrain types. But once I learned this, I played again async with the patrons, and I actually won. So it's like, that was a nice sort of arc for me figuring out the strategy of Harmonies much later than everyone else.
Get good.
Get good, Scrub. But it's nice. I think if you like these sorts of games, if you've got Calico or Cascadia or Parked in your collection and you're like, these are great, this is a no-brainer for you to pick up. It's also really nice and the art's gorgeous and the buildings are appealing. If you play those games and you're like, I don't really like these graphical spatial puzzles, I don't like the drafting thing, I don't like having my own puzzle, and we're all just, the player interaction is entirely, did someone draft the little offering I want? Then, this is not going to change your mind. It's, very consistent with its genre, but it's a good example of the genre. So that was Airecon. I had a really good time playing all those games and seeing everyone. As an open gaming venue, it was really nice. I think that there are some rooms for improvement in the actual convention, really, which is just that there was a couple of kiosks. I don't know if they were brought in for this convention or if they're sort of part of the convention center, but they were really expensive and the offering of refreshments was not great. So, the food that was there was good. It was good food, but it was just not a lot of variety. So even though we were only there for 2 of the 3 days, we were already going, right, we're going to go out for dinner in central Manchester because we don't really want to eat here again. Mm-hmm. So I think, it's tough because it's a very small convention and it's got the right amount of offer for the number of people that were there. But it does feel like when you're used to the sort of the bigger conventions, it does feel like there's not a lot of variety. And so in terms of capacity, it's fine, but it's not really okay in terms of variety because, 2 or 3 days of eating that stuff, of the same thing, and you're sort of like, okay, I'll just bring my own stuff. So I think if you plan on attending, that's what I'd give you the heads up for. Bring lots of refreshments and snacks and things.
And now we know. Well, unfortunately, no conventions for me to have attended, but I have been playing a game or two myself. So I've been keeping up with Board Game Arena's calendar, which I mentioned in the last episode. If I manage to get to the end of this month opening every little box, that'll be the first time since like 2021 when they introduced it that I might have remembered to log in every day and have a look at what it is. So there's a few games I've not played yet, but the ones that I have played that are of note are Mountain Goats. So Mountain Goats is a game by Stefan Risthaus, published by BoardGameTables.com. Clever that, having your website as your company name. And it is a dice chucking game where... How am I supposed to... I'm going to explain this. I just got to explain the whole thing. Basically, you've got 5 columns, 5 numbered 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, you got 10 as well, so you've got 6 columns. And at the bottom of each, you have your little meeple, which is a goat. And on your turn, you roll 4 dice, and you can group them in any combination to make numbers. And for each group that you have, you can move a goat up that corresponding column. So 5 and 6 have 3 in them. 7 and 8 have 2 in them. Take it back. 5 and 6 have 4 in them. 7 and 8 have 3 in them. And 9 and 10 have 2 in them. And when you get your goat to the top, you get a token that's worth that many points. And there's a limited number of tokens for each of them. In subsequent turns, if you roll that same number, you can get another token for those points. But if another player gets to the top, they kick you off back to the bottom of the mountain, and you have to start again to get back up to the top. Now, if you collect the set of all the numbers, you get a bonus token, and played with the expansion, which is just a separate board that goes up to 24, between 11 and 24, and at any point you can remove one of your goats from contention on those columns and add it to that number that you've rolled, and at the end of the game, the 3 highest value goats will score points. Game ends when either 3 columns are empty or all the bonus tokens are gone. There's only 4 bonus tokens. And it is very much in line with Can't Stop. I don't know if you've played Can't Stop. It's the default game on Board Game Arena if you ever have to log in.
I have played it only when I first made my Board Game Arena account.
Yeah. So Can't Stop's a little different, and it's got the push your luck element, whereas this is just you get what you get on the dice rolls. If you roll multiple ones, you can change one of the faces to anything you like. But you'll always have 1-1. And it was fine. It was fun. Deciding when the expansion added enough decision making that it was worth adding to the game. Like otherwise, you're just kind of grouping. Okay, well, I'm going to get I can get 2 5s and a 6, so I'm going to move my 5 goat twice and my 6 goat once. Or instead of moving your 5 goat twice, do you move your 10 goat once? And so it wasn't a huge amount of decision space. But now, getting to the top, deciding when, okay, well, there's no point in me competing for these tokens anymore, because by the time I get to the top, they'll all be gone. I'm going to go into the big mountain and try and score some points there. Or I'm going to go, I've got everything except the 7. I'm going to go up the 7 track, so I'll get a bonus token. And it's not a complicated game. You can break it out with anybody, but it is fun. Super simple, and plays in 5 minutes on Board Game Arena at least, and it wouldn't be too much longer in real life. So I can recommend it if you get a chance, but it's not groundbreaking or particularly cerebral. Unlike Sherlock 13, which is a deduction game that's out on Board Game Arena now. That's created by Hope Hwang and published by Board M Factory. I think it was originally a Korean published game, but now out in English. And in this game, I've only played it 2-player, which is slightly different, where you have a hand of 5 characters from Sherlock Holmes, and each of those characters has symbols that you will be able to cross off a player sheet Well, the characters you have you can cross off, but you're trying to deduce the criminal, which is a face down card in the middle of the board. So every player is trying to deduce the criminal from these 13 characters in the Sherlock universe. And so that's, whether that's Moriarty or Watson or Sherlock himself. But anyway, each of these characters has a symbol. And on your turn, you are able to ask the other player, do you have, or how many pipes do you have? And they maybe tell you 2. And so on your little deduction sheet, you write down 2. And then you're like, well, hold on, there's only 3 characters with pipes, and I've got one of them. So I know that they've got these 2 characters. You can score them out. And through the process of elimination, you're trying to figure out who that face down card is. Now, in 3 or 4 player, there's only the face down card. But in a 2-player game, there's another 2 face down cards that you can exchange one of your cards with. And so once you know that player knows what your card is, you can discard it face up and get a new card for some new information. And it's just a race to the first person to figure out what that face down criminal card is. If you get it wrong, you're out, and in a 2-player game, that's the end. The other person wins. And if you're playing with somebody particularly vocal and they're like, oh yeah, I know what it is, and it's like, well, the only way you can know what that is if you have this card, so that means that this is this then. So I won 2 games by the other person giving away information by saying that they knew what it was. And I was like, well, the only way you could know what it is if this was true. And I was able to have the next guess and then beat them to it. But they learned that for the future and beat me a couple of times. It's fun. It's not as good as, say, Break the Code, which is another deduction game where you ask questions to try and determine a number. Either the other player's number or a number in the middle of the board. But it's fun enough and quick enough that you can play a few games just as a warm-up or warm-down for an evening. Have I made you play Break the Code?
I haven't played Break the Code.
That's great. We should play it. You played Sherlock 13?
Nope.
No? Sad. Another game I think is maybe worth mentioning is Amazonas, or Amazonas. Unsure how to pronounce that last A. This is a game by Stefan Dora, published by Cosmos, and I would say it's a delayed action point game. So the game is about building out your network on the board of little villages around the Amazon. And in each of those villages, it will be there's different tiles to collect. And that could be an iguana, it could be a butterfly, it could be a fish. Something like that. And you're looking to collect sets of tiles to score points on them at the end of the game. And the earlier you go to a location, the cheaper it is to go in there. First person costs 3, next person costs 4, then 5. Get in there. But to get the points to do that, you're playing cards from your hand. So every round, you play a card from your hand. You will get the value on that card plus the number of tiles that matches the card that you played. You have to get 3 silvers to get a gold point, and the gold points, or maybe it's like 6 silvers to get a gold point. And the gold points are what you use to place a village down by paying the cost. Whether that's 3, 4 or 5. And you can only go to certain locations. They're connected by different tracks, and there's an objective, or you get a personal objective at the start of the game that says you want to be in these 4 villages, and you'll get 3 points per village. So the aim of the game is just to get the most points. You'll get points for being in those objective villages. You'll get points for each tile as long as you have 3 of those tiles, or a minimum of 3 of those tiles. So your first tile, worth nothing. Your second tile, worth nothing. Your third tile, worth 3. Fourth, 4, 5, 5, so on and so forth. So you want to really focus on getting as many of a single tile as possible, or at least getting 3 of every kind of tile. There's no exponential scaling or anything like that. It's very much just a flat curve. Can you have a flat curve? Is that an oxymoron? for it. And the game is a game. It was okay, played it a couple of times. Like I said, it's from 2005 and it kind of shows a little bit. But Stefan Dorham did also make For Sale, and that was in 1997. And that's a great little auction game. So you can't just say that because something's old, it's not good, but this is very much of its time.
So this sounds like it's a little bit more meaty than For Sale.
No. Not particularly. Like, on your turn, all you're really doing is picking a card to play. You gain those resources, you trade up your silvers for your golds, and then there's an event that's flipped over, and that could be a monkey will steal 2 silvers, or if you play the highest value, you can get a wild tile this turn. And then you decide whether you're going to move into a village on your turn. You can go into as many villages as you want on a single turn, but it's very hard to get the resources to do so. And that's it. I wouldn't say it's particularly cerebral again.
So another reasonably light one.
Yeah.
But not really worth investigating.
If it's 10 minutes, like, it's not a long game either, particularly on digital version, but I wouldn't go out of my way to track it down or play in real life.
Fair enough. So is this our next box from BGA then?
So still on BGA, but games that are cerebral. Pond. So Pond is a game by David Rose, published by Grubwater Games. I actually didn't have a look, but I presume this is probably one of their few games potentially self-published.
Well, I did look into this actually because I hadn't heard of it, and currently it's not published at all. So David has designed this themselves and put this out with Grubwater Games, but it is intending to come to Kickstarter later this year, and there is a print and play version currently available.
Gotcha. So Pond is a 2-player abstract game where players take turns turning eggs into tadpoles into frogs, trying to make a set of 3 to score them as points. So when the game begins, there's nothing on the board. You can take 1 egg from your tray and put it on the board in any of the spaces. Whenever a player's piece ends its move next to another piece, whether it's yours or not, that piece will evolve, right? Or it's not evolve, but grow, adapt, I can't remember. So eggs grow into tadpoles, and tadpoles grow into frogs. So if I put an egg down, you put an egg down, my egg becomes a tadpole. With me so far. If I put another egg down next to my tadpole becomes a frog. If you put another egg down next to my frog becomes an egg. So it's a continuous loop round for what it is. But on that action, when you put your egg next to my frog and it becomes an egg, then there are 3 eggs in a row which are removed from the game and then put in their respective players' score piles. So if I have 2 of mine down, you complete the set with 1 of yours, I get 2 points, you get 1 point, and it's the first to 10 points. Now tadpoles can also move 1 space, and frogs can move 2 spaces, leaping over another piece. So in addition to placing eggs from your pool, you can also move pieces on the board to, it's not evolve, I can't remember what the word is that they use, but to level up your pieces or the pieces that they finish next to, because it's not just your pieces that gain the benefit, but what you're trying to do is do it in a way where either you're only removing your pieces to score the points, or you're getting a favourable trade where you're getting 2 or 3 of your pieces for 1 of the opponent's pieces. And it's an abstract game at its core, but it is quite fun, and it is in the same kind of vein as Mindleaf. You probably never played that, but nope. Quarto or Purga are a couple of games that are also on Board Game Arena if you want to check them out. And if you like abstract games, I think you'd like this reasonably, at least. Have you played any of those games I've mentioned?
Nope.
Not enough minis?
No, I don't know. It's I don't tend to sort of play these little abstract games unless somebody brings them out.
Yeah. Well, again, it's 2-player only, right? So the niche as well. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then one of the newer games that has hit Board Game Arena is River Valley Glassworks. This was a big hit, I think, at potentially Gen Con or I think it came out there. And it is a game by Adam Hill, Ben Pinchback, and Matt Riddle, published by Allplay, and the art's by Andrew Bosley. So
Allplay is BoardGameTables.com.
Is that the other?
It's the same. They renamed it.
Gotcha.
After they started making actual board games to put on the tables.
Makes sense then. Well, I did have a look at the box for Mountain Goats, and it still had Board Games Table on it, so I guess they've not updated that yet.
An older one from them then, probably.
Yeah. And if you've not seen this, this is a resource drafting game, but you're limited in what you can get. There is a multi-segmented river in which there are little pieces of river glass. There can be 8 different colours in 6 different shapes. You have glass in front of you. You can take one of those pieces and put it in the matching segment of the river, which will then allow you to draft all the bits of glass to the left or right of that piece. And then you put them into your scoring board. So the pieces that you're using to put out are not scoring pieces, but the pieces that you draft after doing so are put into your board. And they're sorted by colour on your scoring board. And there's 7 columns and 8 colours, remember. And you would just put them in the next available space for that colour. So if you don't have that colour, it goes into the bottom of the next column. And if you do have that colour, it goes into the row above wherever you've got to for that colour. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. Completing rows scores you points, or also having in a row, the first 4 of the 7 would score you 11 points. You complete the row, you get 22 points, something like that. And similarly, the higher up a column you go, the more points you get. However, if there are any pieces that you can't place, they get put into like a discard pile and they're worth -3 points at the end. So you're trying to get as many suitable or as many matching bits of glass from the river as possible without going over to start picking up these negative points. Wherever you take the pieces from, that bit of river goes to the back of the river and then it's refilled with 1 or 2 bits of glass based on the piece it goes next to.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I have seen this set up because I believe it was on Kickstarter and now it's in the process of delivery. But the main game board is a river that's made up of tile segments, and the tiles, as you say, get bits of glass on them.
Yeah.
And then when you take the offering off of the tile, you fit it into this tableau that you're building, and then that section of the river moves back to the start and slides the rest down.
Correct. Yeah. And each of those segments on the river has a different shape on it, which is what dictates what you do with the bits of glass that you have to place. And you can also draw more bits of glass or draft more bits of glass to spend that don't go on your scoreboard, so you don't run out of options when it comes to placing. So part of the skill is putting down pieces that you know that you're going to want to take later, that your opponents maybe not. So on this turn, you're putting down an avocado shaped piece. That's one of them. And
I found this avocado in the river.
Yeah, and it's like this dark blue. And you're like, okay, I want to claim this piece later, so I'm going to play this and take these and then hope that my opponents haven't taken that by the time it comes back around to me, and then I'll place the diamond piece and that'll let me take the avocado pieces and put them on my board. It's not super complex again. Very family weight, something everybody can kind of pick up. You may, you might end up getting pieces you don't want and have to get those negative points, but generally you can plan it out. You don't want to be taking loads of singles, but you do want to be completing rows. So there's a balance there for, well, I'm going to take the common. It's also worth noting on your player board, it tells you the degrees of how common these colours are from lowest to highest. So there's 2 very common and 2 rare, and then 2 in the middle at varying commonalities. And so you're planning it all out, and it's fun. It's good. I'm not going to rush out and buy it, but it was fun to play, and I'll give it a go if anybody's got it. I do think it could use, again, I said last time, I don't think games after a couple necessarily need an expansion, but I wouldn't mind a little bit more complexity or something else I could do with the bits of glass I'm drafting. So we'll see whether that happens, whether there's an expansion coming for it.
Very good.
And that is pretty much up to date on Board Game Arena.
So we will move from Board Game Arena to real life games, where I've been playing a real life game from 2002, I think, or whenever this came out. It's Lord of the Rings: The Confrontation. I mentioned that I'd ordered it because it's coming back to Kickstarter and I wanted the nostalgic ancient edition. So I did that and I played it. It is only 2-player. It is Stratigo, reimagined with a Lord of the Rings theme by Reiner Knizia. And there's a deluxe version that came out about 3 or 4 years later, which had modular expansions from Christian Petersen and Eric Lang, but it no longer had the John Howe art that they used in the original version. So I don't know why they got rid of that, but it is a pity. And I think I mentioned on the podcast that your first game will probably, I think I mentioned last time I talked about this, which might have been the last podcast, that your first game would take you like 40 minutes, and then after that it'd be much quicker. It wouldn't even take that long. Like, honestly, I don't know. I must have misremembered how long this game is. Maybe it just felt longer when we were playing it, decades ago. But I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to make this game last 20 minutes, honestly, even when you're learning it. And it's one of those games that's sort of best to learn just by playing, because it's sort of like, it's ultimately really going to be a case of like, have you traded off pieces successfully enough? Did you manage to kill Frodo? Ultimately, what's going on in this game is Frodo is trying to get to Mordor, and the evil player is trying to block Frodo from doing that. And you're moving pieces around on a board that represents the journey from the Shire to Mordor, and those pieces are concealed. So that's the Stratigo element, right? You've got these plastic covers that go around these tiles, and so you can see what all your pieces are and where they are, and you can see where your opponent's pieces are, but not what they are, and vice versa. And so if the good player gets Frodo to the Mordor space at the other side of the board, then they win. And if the evil player gets 4 pieces, any 4 pieces into the Shire, or kills Frodo, then they win. And it's really it's a really short game with hidden information. And you start off very tentatively with both sides sort of set up on either side of this battlefield, and you're sort of taking the tiles you think you can afford to lose or safely explore with, and you're attacking your opponent's tiles and revealing them in order to try and get some information about what's going on where. And certain tiles can move in unique and weird ways. So, when a tile does that, you know what tile it is because it's the only one that can do that. That sort of thing. And so you're sort of trying to track where these pieces are. And ultimately as well, while you're poking at your opponent's forces and trying to figure out what's going on, where it is, you're also trying not to let your pieces get too far out of position because they can't move backwards. So if you push your defenses as the evil player too far forward early on, Frodo will slip between them and get into Mordor. And likewise, if you're the good guy player, some of the evil player's pieces can literally jump the whole board to attack you right at the back. And that is quite a good strategy for the evil player to move those pieces directly into the Shire if they're going for that victory condition, or at least threatening it. So, it's a lovely little dueling game. I mean, I think, it is probably, if it was open information, incredibly dull. It is. It's not that complex, and it's largely just a case of trading off pieces and trying to figure out what kind of bluffs your opponent is pulling. But the game is in the fact that these things are concealed and temporarily revealed, And there's a sort of, an element of like when a piece moves into a space with another piece, you can take them off the board and hide them under the table and flip them around a little bit and put them back so your opponent doesn't know which one's which, that's... Or, they just look away while you do it. But that's kind of the point, right? Like it's almost like a little memory game obfuscating what is a sort of abstract positioning game. And where pieces don't just immediately counter each other, like Gimli kills the orcs the minute they fight, that sort of thing. There's a sort of a card play situation, and you're unlikely to get through your whole hand in a game, so you have to play those cards out really carefully. Anyway, it was an absolute delight. I really had a good time playing it. I lost horribly both times, so I guess experience doesn't matter at all. But I really enjoyed it. I think, I'd be... If I didn't have this version now, I'd be tempted to pick up the Kickstarter version. Obviously, there have been these 2 modular expansions before. I don't know if the new publishers have access to the older expansions, but I don't really know how this is going to be on crowdfunding. I suspect that this is probably more a point of the publisher's business model rather than, a desire to blow this up into a much bigger game, because it's not got the scope for that. I do think those original expansions looked quite nice. They offer alternate pieces with different powers. I think that would be fun to swap them up. But I also don't think, I don't think it's entirely necessary. The version I have comes with some alternate cards, so you can change out some of the card play. And the deluxe version had even more alternate cards. But, anyway, if it's reasonably affordable on crowdfunding, I think this would be a great little game to get, especially if you like 2-player sort of positional war games, or games that sort of capture that feeling of a war game, but are very simple. But if it's incredibly expensive, I'd be hard pressed to see how they could justify it. Like it's a tiny box. I mean, minis don't work. It's the pieces are hidden, Yeah. You'd have to have like a mini in an opaque container.
Worth it.
And then you lift the lid to reveal the Aragorn mini. It'd be so silly.
Man, I did try to play this. I went up to Drafts in Hackney, who claimed to have this on the shelves, but I was unable to find it. And of course, I needed to maintain my board game creds. I couldn't ask somebody whether they had it, so we played other games instead. Speaking of other games,
speaking of FFG classics,
well, not anymore, but yes,
ex-FFG games.
Yeah, well, ex-FFG properties, probably staff, and who knows. Anyway, let's get into it. So, River of Gold, right, which is designed by Keith Piggott and published by Office Dog, which is this weird Asmodee sub company that also among those picking the bones of FFG's former staff and former IPs and everything else.
I've never heard of Office Dog.
I think this is the first game.
So they are something that Asmodee set up?
Yeah.
Okay.
As far as I'm aware, anyway. I don't know the inner workings of it. It could just be somebody that they've purchased. Who knows? And then because they have the IP, they've just been like, well, why don't you slap this IP on it? Because it's got nothing to do with L5R. So River of Gold, I think I mentioned in the previous podcast, and I explained it a little bit like a Tokaido type game where you're moving down this river and getting the income, the abilities of the places that you stop. So it's a little more involved than that, having played it now. It is along those lines, but every turn you're rolling a dice and there's ways of mitigating that dice and changing the value, but you have to take one of your 2 ships and move it that many spaces down the river, at which point you will get all the rewards on the 3 points on the river that area touches. If somebody else owns the building that you're getting the resources from, there is an owner bonus. They'll get a little bonus for doing that as well. And the game continues until enough of these buildings have been built along the river, or I can't remember the other victory conditions. That was the way it always ended when we played it. But there are other victory conditions. And you're basically gathering resources. On your turn, you're able to buy a building to put into these blank slots along the river, and you're trying to get into certain areas, and you can only build buildings that match the dice that you've rolled, and you would only get rewards for things that match the dice that you've rolled. So there's 6 segments on the river as well, so you're going to get more things if you roll I can't even remember what the sections were, it's so generic. If you get the temple roll on the dice, which I think is the 1, and you end up in the 1 section, you get stuff. You get more stuff out of it. But as you go down the river, once you come off the bottom, you go back to the top, and it just cycles through. And you've got 2 boats, so you've always got a bit of choice as to where you're going to end up. In addition to that, there's scoring tracks down the side of the board, and when you're getting some of those rewards, you're moving your token along the scoring tracks. The further along the scoring tracks you get, the more there'll be certain bonuses for getting to a certain point along there. You're collecting patrons, or like you're playing out cards that give you immediate effects and ongoing effects. And as I said, the game ends once all the buildings are kind of gone, and there's a way of cycling through that. Every time somebody goes off the bottom, buildings cycle out, and when people buy them, buildings cycle out. There's 2 distinct ages. The first age, again, just based on the number of buildings, but once that first age is done, there's a scoring round, and then the game will end after the second age, where the other scoring room is done. And as I said, the fact that I'm struggling to remember anything's name, like it's just not, there was nothing about L5R, The Legend of the Five Rings, that was coming through in this game at all. It looked like it had probably been made as something else and then reskinned as L5R. Asmodee's like, here, do something with this IP. And the game itself was fine, but it was just so-so, right? It's not... didn't seem to have a huge amount of complicated decisions, because you are still restricted to some degree by what you've rolled on the dice. And there was a couple of times I couldn't figure out, I was playing online again, so Board Game Arena will keep you right. And I was like, well, why can't I do this? And it's like, oh, because I've not rolled the right number or the right symbol to be able to do this in this section. And it took most of the first game to get to grips with what you can and can't do based on where you end up and what dice you've rolled. But then after that, flowed quite smoothly, but you're still at the mercy of rolling the dice and whether or not you want to spend a whole bunch of resources to change that dice, or save up to buy the buildings, or save up to buy the patrons, or when you're going for points versus resources. It was fine.
So it's sort of like a dice action selection game with some mitigation, but the mitigation is very expensive.
Yeah, you've only got 1 die to roll, so it's not like you've got a choice of things, right? But then you can change what that dice is. It's not super expensive to change it, mostly only if you want to go all the way. But similarly, because you've got 2 boats, you've also got a choice of where they're going to end up as well. So it's mitigated in that way already, and that the actions are variable beginnings, and then but resources are tight for getting the right kind of patrons to get the stuff that you want. And there's end game, there's objectives as well to score in the game, like just it's point salady, and particularly once a lot of buildings are out, because everywhere you stop you're getting points, you're getting resources, you're getting stuff to go. And then like it's playable, not set my world alight.
Fair enough. Well, speaking of taking actions with dice, I've been playing Divinus, the Chest of Plenty, which is not as hot as it sounds.
Yeah.
This is designed by Philip McCuskey and published by Lucky Duck Games. This was a big Kickstarter. that must have been on Kickstarter a couple of years ago. I think this has had some redevelopment once the Kickstarter kicked off, so it was a bit later than intended. It is a legacy campaign tile-laying game. And the Chest of Plenty comes with 2 expansions, one of which is a continuation of the campaign, and one of which is a sort of scenario-based version of the game that you can play once you complete the original campaign. Thematically, the Norse gods have arrived in ancient Greece and decided to do battle with them for control of the land.
Okay.
And you play as a demigod. You play as a demigod. That's the word I'm looking for. You play as a
a
semigod. Yeah, that's the right one.
A quasi-god, the margarine of God, diet god, less than 1%.
I can't believe this isn't God. So you play as a demigod, and your job is to basically please the warring gods and try and sort of navigate through the conflict so that at the end of it, whoever wins, you'll be made a full deity. And so that's the sort of the premise of the tile laying. You are a demigod building a land, and you hope that the land will please the winners of this conflict. And the game begins very simply with this conceit of 2 pools of tiles that come out of 2 different stacks. Each tile is made up of different lands. It can be 2 different or 3 different kinds of lands. It's either fields, oceans, or mountains. And often there's just 2, but sometimes there's all 3 in different configurations. But it's typical tile laying in that you've got these 3 terrain types, and their tiles are square, and each edge of the square is holistically 1 terrain. Right, so you might have 3 edges of water and 1 of mountain or whatever. And one deck also has peoples on the land. So there's either Vikings or Greek soldiers. And in the other deck, there are these things called sacred spots, which don't matter at all at the start of the game, but might become important later. They will. Spoiler, they will become important later. But the tiles are then dealt into a marketplace, which contains 12 of them, and the marketplace spots are numbered 1 to 12. And then during the game, what you're doing is you're rolling 5 dice, and then you can use the dice they're just d6s, 5 d6s, and you can use them in any configuration to achieve one of the spots. So you might play a 6 and a 5 to go into the 11, or you might play a 2 and a 3 to go into the 1. Because you're taking the 2 away from the 3. So you can add and subtract them, only that. You're not allowed to multiply or divide, so don't even try it, Barry. But you can add and subtract to get a data spot. Yeah, exactly. And you can place any number of them as well. So if you really want to go into the 6 spot, but you only have 2s, you can play 3 2s, or you could play, 6 1s. Well, you don't have 6 dice. In the 2-player game, you have 6 dice. But we're playing 3 players. Which feels like the game is very much designed around that count. More on that in a minute. But, so you play out the dice into the market to collect the tile, you put it into your tableau, and then when you run out of dice, or you've only got 1 die left or something like that, you can take what's called a rest turn, and you pick all the dice back up and you roll them again to get new numbers. And the game starts off with giving you 1 sticker to put on one face of your die. So you're immediately like, oh, cool. I'm going to be able to upgrade the face of this die. And then it rolls out these sort of objectives. So it's like, okay, in mission 1, the Vikings want you to do this, and the Greek gods want you to do this. And actually, what it does specifically is it gives you a card. So there's 2 cards come out, and one is, I can't remember which 2 Greek gods it was, or which 2 gods it was right off the bat. But let's just pretend it's Thor and Ares. I think that's game 2 or 3, but And Thor wants this, and Ares wants a different thing. And so you sort of build your tableau one way or the other to try and please these gods. And if in a perfect world, you could probably actually please them both quite well, but their demands are whoever does it best, their competitive demands. So in a perfect world, you're not taking anyone else into consideration. So basically, someone beats you on Thor, someone else beats you on Ares, and now you've done nothing. You've pleased neither of them. Sad. So really, you kind of need to focus on one because, somebody who's focusing on just Thor is going to beat you on that. And then there are these objectives that come out that are sort of little bonuses as well that are first come, first served. So the first person to make a lake area that has 5 different tiles in it, that sort of thing. And the first game was very pleasant. We had a nice time with it. There were some new rules rolled out. It was probably a little too simple for too long. And it started to, I felt like it started to wear out its welcome a little bit, but that was fine. And then at the end of the game, it's like, oh, you've pleased the Norse gods, you get Norse god favor. You've pleased the Greek gods, you get Greek god favor. You also, by doing those little missions I mentioned earlier, you could have gotten some favor during the game. And then it will total your favor, and that's what carries over round to round, your sort of total god favor. And then your favor with the individual pantheons will be reset. And then later on, it starts to roll out more rules and things. And now I'm going to get into spoilers. So if you're, looking to play Divinus, then I will be spoiling games 2 and 3 from now on, because I honestly can't remember when these things rolled out exactly. And I can't really talk about it more without spoilers, I'm afraid. But, only up to game 3, because we've only played 3 of the 12 games. So, then there is, in game 2, the introduction of a lot more rules and things like that. And there is so much stickering. There's so much stickering. I couldn't believe how much stickering there was. I couldn't believe how much stickering there was that was in the rule book. Just huge, like entire pages of, like a sticker that's just one whole page goes in the rule book. It was wild. Like, I don't generally have a problem with that, but I don't know why all the rulebook needed to be stickers. Some of it needed to be stickers, like when you're sort of augmenting an existing process that has already been somewhat outlined, you can couch a sticker in there to change that process or add more complexity. But when it's like a whole page, that could just be a section later in the rulebook, and it's like, don't look at this section till later, So it's wild. And what's also wild is like it's sort of changing things game to game. So in like game 3, we were already stickering over stuff that we did in game 2 to change it. Again, I don't really have an issue with that. But I did feel like it could have been possibly written a little bit more elegantly to reduce the amount of stickering we actually had to do. The other thing that kind of annoyed me was that there were 2 pages where it's sort of like your actions and your rest actions. So you start to get actions that you can do around when you recall and re-roll your dice, which is great, because otherwise that would feel like a bit of a missed turn, Mm-hmm. So it's great that they build on that and give you stuff to do. That was great. But there are no player aids. And to be fair, given the speed at which things rolled out and how much attention we had to pay to it, we didn't feel like a real desperate need for player aids, but there aren't any in the app and there aren't any in the box. And that just feels really odd, especially because we're putting stickers for all of our actions in the rulebook. And it would be almost better to have those on cards, know? So that was kind of, that felt a bit odd, but that's fine because, overall, like, for a start, for some reason, I'm really bad at this game, which is fine. I don't mind being really bad at this game, but I don't know if maybe I'm just confused around the way the scoring sort of works. Not necessarily mechanically how it works, but the sort of the greater ramifications. Because you can, game to game, pivot whoever you're supporting. Maybe you're more Norse this game. Maybe next time you're more Greek. Doesn't matter. You're very fickle and you can do whatever you want based on the current objectives. It just so happened that we were all going very hard into the Nordic side, and the Norse gods are like crushing this war. Which again is not really a problem, but I'm sort of interested in the longer term ramifications, because the only sort of metric that seems to be tracked in the app game to game is your total combined favor. And our scores have all been relatively close game to game, but I've always sort of come last by like 2 or 3 points. And so the gulf is just widening. Mm-hmm. And if you get to the end and it's just like total favor, here's the winner, that's going to feel very underwhelming. Not least of which because this is supposed to be a war between the Norse and the Greeks, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of measure or punishment for like changing sides game to game. So thematically, the whole scoring system just feels a little like weird, you know? Not weird, but like sort of not well embedded in the context of the game, right? Like the tile laying thing that we're doing game to game is really good. The people I'm playing it with are really enjoying it, you know, and insofar as they are trying to get the most total favor game to game as a sort of a metric for a single session, that's being well enjoyed and it seems to work well. However, I'm struggling to think of this as a single session thing, and my brain, for whatever reason, is more locked into the sort of longer term ongoing ramifications of what we're doing and picking sides. And I'm not sure if that matters. And we've not seen any indication that it will matter. And so the campaign part of the game feels a bit like it's not being well delivered. Just like in terms of a legacy game that's rolling out more content session to session, yeah, it's all over that. There's so much stuff coming out, like all the time. It's like, here's new toys, here's new toys, here's new toys, here's more stickers. And that's great. Like that part, great. But what it doesn't feel like is it's all in service of this grand war. Like, yeah, we get two deities fighting every game, and then one of them is being defeated and put back in the dead box out of the game, and the other one's going back into this sort of pool of like secondary deities that might come out later. So we are seeing these sort of ramifications of the war and who's winning game to game. But what I'm not getting a sense of is our involvement in that really mattering. Yeah. Because like you can totally support a god who dies and then just next game pivot to supporting the god that killed them without any seeming ramifications, and that doesn't feel right to me. So it's possible that it's just this sort of strange thematic disconnect that's sort of inhibiting my sort of full investment in the game. But I'll play more of Divinus, and there's definitely a lot going on, and I'm sort of keen to see more of it. It is only 12 games. We did 3 games in a single afternoon, so you know it's not an outrageous amount of sort of content to explore. The last thing I'd mention is I think that they sort of acknowledged as well that there might be a bit of an issue with like positive feedback loop, because I'm losing a lot of games. I just have like less stuff than everyone else and less things I can do. So they put 3 dice in the game. One is the Nordic favorite die. So if you scored the most points with the Norse gods this game, you get that in the next game. Likewise, there's a Greek version. And then finally, there's Gaia, who's this sort of neutral observer, and she's got her "you're dumb" die, and she gives it to the dummy, who's me. Except that there's kind of, and it is feasible as well. Like you first start, you have to be like 5 points behind to get the dummy die. It's actually rolled, the first time it's rolled out, you just get it. But then later, you have to be further behind to get it. It is also possible to like win the Norse side of things and still lose the game, so you could feasibly have the dummy die and the Norse god's favorite die. That's not happened. I've not become favorite with either pantheon of the 2 main pantheons. I've not become the favorites. I've never had multiple extra dice. And what's more annoying is that the sort of the god dice that have gone out, the Nordic one and the Greek one, have abilities that have largely overlapped with the abilities my opponents have developed. So they're sort of redundant. Which is kind of just I guess the point I'm trying to make is that they're sort of so far ahead in terms of their passive abilities that they don't even need those dice.
Right, yeah.
And then the die I have is just another D6, and you would think that would give me extra actions, but if I roll poorly, it's not that great. It's actually, I think, the worst of the 3, which makes it feel like a really odd choice for a catch-up mechanism. You know, it certainly didn't help yet. So we'll see how that plays out.
When you lose by an additional points next time.
Yeah, well, I think the thing is like, you know, if the gulf just continues to grow, I think that's kind of a fundamental problem, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it won't. My opponents are more incentivized to sort of focus on each other because they are, in more contention. So that's, good. And that's definitely something that should be taken into consideration. And maybe that will lead to a more equalizing of the game state. We'll have to see. We can only discover by playing more. But the last thing I just sort of mentioned about it as well is that it really seems designed for 3 players because there is not a 4th die for the 4th player. So 1 player will be no god's favorite and also not the last player, so they'll get no bonus die. And furthermore, there was a section where we had to put out stickers onto tiles, and it was sort of part of a quest we were setting up. So everyone gets a sticker to put into the tile arrangement they've made at the end of the game. And so when they're shuffled back into the deck next game, the stickers will be revealed. And it's just a case of distribution. Like, you could just give 1 player all the stickers and they could just sticker 3 random tiles. It doesn't really matter. But, it's nice that the game is like, now each player takes 1 and puts them into their play area. Yeah. But there's only 3 of each sticker. So, like, if you were playing with a 4th player, they just wouldn't get any stickers to do.
Sad.
So sad for them. So it really feels like it was designed with 3 players in mind. And, I don't know how much a 4th player would really be adding to the experience. But anyway, that's Divinus. I will play more of it and report back once I've had a chance to. It may not be next time. It's also app-driven, by the way. There's quite a lot of stuff going on in the app. That was sort of Lucky Duck's thing for a while. So, really, all the app is really doing is 2 things. 1, it's tracking scores. And 2, it's there's a function where the stickers, the camera on your phone can look at the stickers, and then it will read you a little narrative event based on the sticker it looked at. And you might have a choice to make. And that's about it. But, it's a nice addition. I wasn't too bothered by the app. I do project the app onto the big screen in my games room so that everyone can see the scores as the game is ongoing. And because you only use 1 app, I do think that if you were not using like a tablet that everyone could see, but you were using like a phone, I think there would be maybe a bit of an annoyance about not being able to just glance at the scores. Like, it's the only way to sort of track the scores currently. And it's only really tracking the scores from the last game. But I do think that's quite important to be able to see. And so, yeah, there is that. But, the app's not a huge part of it. So, at least it doesn't seem to be yet. But we'll see. Who knows what else it's tracking in the background. Well, I don't know it all yet.
No, what you said about the game there, a lot of that's also in, I'd say, like Ticket to Ride Legacy, where you're putting stickers down for every new rule that you open, except there wasn't any points where you were covering something up, right? Those spaces were set at the start, and you would add that rule when you got to it, was the thing. And with the catch-up for that, you basically got an extra turn if you were last in the previous game to try and get ahead in the subsequent game. So that's a slightly better catch-up mechanism than maybe nothing.
Well, I do think, just on the topic of sort of campaign games in general, like, I think people lean into narrative-driven campaign games like, Oathsworn or something like that, where it's collaborative and it's narrative-driven, because to make a sort of a competitive game feel like it has meaningful impacts over the course of many games, I think is really difficult. And I think actually Risk Legacy did it really, really well, where you don't really care about who wins overall. You just kind of care about who wins game to game, and you get to see the state of the planet evolving over the course of it. I think that's a better way to do it. Whereas the fact that it's tracking this very numerical score in Divinus, it's tracking this very numerical score game to game, but we don't yet know what bigger connotation that has for the campaign as a whole, is, I think, really unhelpful. Like,
yeah,
is it going to matter? Is the end of the game campaign just the person with the most points here wins, or is it going to have more meaning? I think I would rather see the points, the game focusing on who wins each game, but then there's some wider ramification about which god you supported and whether you swapped sides. Like, if you swapped from the Norse objective to the Greek objective this game, like, that pisses off the Norse gods and jeopardizes your chance of becoming a deity if they win. That would be kind of cool narrative context, but that doesn't seem to matter at all, which is kind of a bummer. So I'm hoping that will expand. There is, another 9 boxes for us to open with a lot more stuff in, so we'll see how it evolves anyway.
Sure. Well, I've also been playing a campaign game of choice, of sorts at least I should say, and that's the Mandalorian, the board game, or the adventure game, designed by Cory Knizia. Let me try that again. Cory Knizia. How did I say that?
Cory Knizia.
Knizia. I think I had trouble last time I mentioned it as well. And Josh Bepler, published by Unexpected Games, and this is a co-op game that has a campaign of sorts. It's not really a campaign. It's really an extended tutorial, I would argue, for how to play the game. So, The Mandalorian is based on the TV series of the same name with Baby Yodas. I'm surrounded by Baby Yodas. I have 4 Baby Yodas directly above my head. Baby Yoda cushions. And in it, you play as the characters from the TV show. A variety of scenarios based mostly on the TV show, or originally on the TV show. And in it, you have your own hand of cards. You each play a character. You have your own hand of cards. On your turn, you place a card into actions that are on the board, which will allow you to move, attack, gain some intel, or plan ahead, get an extra item, an extra ability. The cards in your hand have different values and different, some have particular actions, either when you play it into a certain slot or just when you play it anywhere, and different values between 1 and 4, which will power up that action to that degree. So if you play a 4 into the move, you get to move 4 spaces on a map, which is like Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion. You flip book, where the map's already laid out, and on that map you'll place tokens that represent the enemies, represent things to find as you go around. You can attack them. We've got hit points on the enemy tiles, and whenever a certain action on the board gets to 5 or more action points in it, that's enough to trigger an event. So either a simple flip over to see which enemies activate, or a crisis event if you go to 6 or more, which is mission specific. And so the first mission, which I don't think is spoiling anything, is to find Baby Yoda. So 2 players will take turns playing cards into these action slots, and if on their turn it triggers the enemy action or the crisis event, you resolve those, which may result in you getting shot or being attacked or things moving around on the board.
So this is a collaborative skirmish game.
Yes, kind of. Yeah, it's collaborative. And yeah, the maps are small enough. I would go to say it's a skirmish game. Like, it's not very wide ranging on any given scenario. But initially, you're given 2 characters to play, Mandalorian and IG-11. And the game does market itself as a 4-player game, but you can't play 4-player until you get to mission 3, okay. Which is odd. And even then, I don't think it is a 4-player game. But
sad for those people you invited over.
Yeah, mission 1 tells you, do this, and then win or lose, you reveal some new cards that get added into the mix. With a couple of new events, a couple of new cards for your deck, and then win or lose, add a couple of new cards to your thing. And it just takes you through various cards and adds certain rules as you play. So whilst the campaign is these initial 6 missions, and there's only 4 in the book, so there's also a couple of hidden legacy envelopes. So Not even legacy envelopes, just they add more content. There's more content in envelopes, spoiler alert. And you knew it was coming because you're like, there's only 4 missions, that doesn't make any sense. There's more missions in the envelopes. And eventually after those 6 missions, you've unlocked everything and you can play the game proper.
Right.
So it is interesting what they add. I don't think it'd be too much just to start with most of them. But basically, you unlock a few extra abilities, you get new cards into your deck. There's 8 different characters you can play as for the full game, and then once you've unlocked the other scenarios, then you can play 4-player to do everything. It is not it's another light-ish game. I'd say light-medium for this one, and there's not a lot to it. How can I explain how I feel about this game? If you like The Mandalorian, there's enough theme in here and there's enough gameplay in here to be worthwhile. If you don't like The Mandalorian, it is not a particularly good campaign game, and it's not a particularly interesting co-op skirmish. You can play it solo, but you'd be playing at least two-handed. So if you're a solo player, you might like that. But the map sizes, the 4 maps are the only maps that you get. And so whilst different scenarios can be played on those maps, they're too small to be good at 4-player. And there's also not any additional enemies at 4-player.
What?
And so I've not played it at 4-player, but I don't see how it works at 4-player.
Wait, so you just get 2 extra player characters and no extra enemies?
Correct. Now, if you remember, the enemy activations are triggered off hitting certain numerical thresholds in the actions on the board. So the more players, the more often those are going to trigger.
Right, okay.
Theoretically, but they wouldn't trigger any more often than they would at 1 or 2-player in terms of number of player actions that happen.
Right, so yeah, surely then you're just getting extra hit points.
Yes. And so we played 2-player on veteran difficulty from the start. Veteran difficulty starts you with fewer hit points and gives you fewer options from cards in hand.
Is that the hardest one?
That's the hardest mode that's available by default. And although we did come close to dying a couple of times, we breezed through those. We didn't breeze through them, but we successfully completed every mission that was put in front of us. And I don't see how having 2 extra players on missions 3 and 4 and onwards would have made it anything other than super simple. Having an additional 12 hit points, because you get to choose where the enemies shoot if there's a tie for closest or whatever. Yeah. And so being able to distribute those enemy attacks and to have them go after different people and to not have any more bad guys on the board, I don't see how it's a 4-player game. But for the 2-player, it worked very well. Going through the sort of search and rescue missions as well as the wipe out the board kind of thing, and then you do unlock more difficult enemies after the 6th game. Again, spoiler alert, but things do continue to escalate throughout all of the missions. There are, I think if you work it out, there's like 24 different missions, and then there's the option for playing with a potential traitor. At 4 players, there will be a traitor. At 3 players, there's maybe a traitor. And then the traitor has the possibility for gaining just a natural fail, which is a win for them, or a legendary win for them, which is an alternative win condition for just them if they can make us fail in a certain way.
Well, that sounds fun. I like traitors.
Yeah, so I'd give that a go. I think that's the only way that 4 players would work, if somebody was actively working against you.
Right, so what you're suggesting is don't actually bother with 4 until you've unlocked all 6 of the things.
Yes.
I suppose the problem inherently then is that, although you did say earlier that you didn't think that the hidden material escalates the complexity too much, I suppose if you were to introduce 2 people once everything had been unlocked, they have to learn the whole game and they have to know it quite well because one of them might be the traitor.
Yes, possibly, but once you've once you've gone through everything once, it's all mixed in. You can take it apart again. Like all the cards are numbered. But
so you can play 6 games, reset it, give it to your other 2 friends, and be like, when we've played 6 games, we'll get together and play 4 players.
Correct. Yeah, that'd be the only way for that. Like having additional enemies with a couple of extra abilities. There's a player aid card. There's only like 8 abilities in total, you'll cope. Or people that play the heavier games like us will cope quite easily. There's only 4 or 5 actions you can do on a turn. And they're all written out on the board, so you kind of know what they are. Or there's an ability on the card that you have. You can pick it up quite easily. Even the more complicated ones that will let you trigger an ability of any given action. It was fun, right? I'm gonna play it more. I'm gonna play some more of the scenarios. I will try it at 4 players, but it's not a long term game. And the first 4 scenarios are the only ones that are like from the TV show. Otherwise, they're kind of made up scenarios. And I don't know why you only get 4 maps. Like they could easily have just made a bigger map with more enemies, because each enemy is only used on 1 map. And so you've got 4 sets of enemies that you could mix and match or add to. So if you wanted a second map A, you could just use map B's enemies on the board to add additional opponents for higher player counts. Or you could stack them on the single map that you've got, so you've got to defeat them in order. Or there's a lot of things you could have done to make the game more suitable for 4 players. But I'm saying all this with the caveat, I've not played it at 4 players. But in my mind, I don't see how it works. Anyway, another game that was fun, but not something that you're going to be coming back to time after time. It's not got the the replayability of something like Imperial Assault Skirmish Mode. It's nowhere near that in depth, and it doesn't have the variety that Imperial Assault, again, which I think is a very good actual comparison to when you're looking at a campaign game. So Imperial Assault, like it has the app, which this game doesn't, and it's got the tiles to make different maps, which this game doesn't.
But I suppose the problem with Imperial Assault is, one, it's a bigger upfront cost. I think the core set is probably twice the price of this. The other thing is it's also out of print.
Yeah. So
didn't Knizia work on that?
I don't know. Should we find out?
Yeah, I think he might have. While we check, also, Corey Knizia did also design Outer Rim, which is the Star Wars pick up and deliver game set during the same sort of period of the first trilogy.
He did work on Imperial Assault, and again, this is interesting that, just the FFG's bread and butter staff and IPs are just being farmed out to other people.
Well, Corey Knizia left FFG to found Unexpected Games. I don't know what the licensing deal is with Star Wars, but that's their own company.
Yeah.
It's not an Asmodee or FFG subsidiary. But obviously they've got some kind of licensing deal with Asmodee or FFG or maybe just Disney to get to the Mandalorian.
Probably just Disney, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because it used to be that Star Wars was exclusively with FFG, so I don't know how that's changed. But yeah, Knizia also worked on Outer Rim, which is, a Star Wars pick up and deliver game that also kind of suffers the same sort of problem. I think Outer Rim is most fun, theoretically, when there's 4 people on the board interacting with the spaces, scoping out the different characters, competing for the missions, potentially attacking each other. But in practice, there's just way too much downtime at 4.
Yeah.
Like, it's, it wants that kind of level of dynamism. At 2, it also struggles because there's just, you might as well play a solo game. Like, you might never see each other at all. And even at 3, it's kind of pushing on the downtime as well. So it's sort of like one of those, I guess it's just another example of a Knizia Star Wars game that doesn't have an optimal player count.
I did play Outer Rim with the expansion. earlier this year, but it's first game, and there's enough to think about between my turns, so I didn't feel too downtimey at 4, but it was perhaps longer than it should have been.
Yeah. Did you play with the sort of the overarching narrative cards that people have to fulfill?
Yeah, like I didn't know there was an option to not.
They're not in the base game. I can't remember if they are automatically added by the expansion or a module. I can't remember.
Got you. Yeah, you had to finish off like the 3 objectives in order to finish the game. So that was what we did. It was good.
Yeah. I like Outer Rim more than I should. I don't know. It's hard to justify why I like Outer Rim so much.
More than Firefly?
Yes. I mean, thematically, not really. I like Firefly a lot, probably as much as I like Star Wars, but I prefer the game.
Fair enough. Although, speaking of IPs...
Yeah, speaking of sci-fi IPs...
yeah, indeed, since we're here, I went to see Romulus.
Yeah, I was tempted by it. I like the Alien films.
Don't bother. Have you seen Alien 1?
The first Alien film?
Yeah. Have you seen Alien 2?
Yep.
Have you seen Alien 3?
Yep.
Have you seen Alien 4?
I have.
Well, then you've seen Romulus.
Okay.
It's just like watching all 4 movies simultaneously.
Oh dear.
And including all the bad bits, unfortunately. So I'm not going to review the movie here, but it is potentially the best of a bad bunch. There's lots of things to like in it, but it's not good. Let's put it that way.
Oh, that's a bummer. I was quite excited about it, actually.
Yeah, it's just it doesn't get there.
You're not the first person to say this to me either.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. I quite liked everybody that was in it, and I quite liked some of the theory of the story. I think they were hamstrung by some of the prequels and sequels, but also they didn't have to go in the direction that they did. Off the back of that, I thought, you know what's I do like though? Legendary Encounters Alien. So this is a game by Ben Chichowski and Daniel Mandel. And whether or not they made Legendary proper, I can't remember, or whether they're just the Encounters guys. But this is published by Upper Deck, and unfortunately I think it's out of print. I don't think they've maintained the license, so I don't think we'll be getting a Romulus expansion for Legendary Encounters Alien. But this is a...
very quickly, before you dive into that, on the subject of Legendary, this is a series of collaborative deck builders that's been very popular. I think, was the first Legendary Marvel?
Yes.
And then they've had a number of other spin-offs. I personally have only played a very small number, and the only one I really recall playing is the Predator one.
So that's compatible with and similar to the Alien. So there's the 2 sets. There's the Encounters and the Legendary series. The Legendary series is not just cooperative. In fact, it's more competitive. Cooperative. They did introduce some more cooperative rules as things went on, but it was just you were trying to beat up the super villain from Marvel. And there's hundreds of Marvel expansions for Legendary now. But then they did Legendary Encounters, which is the full co-op tell a story version of the game, starting with Alien, introduced Predators, and has since gone on to Firefly, actually, and The Matrix is the most recent one. I think X-Files was the other Encounters IP. But the game is a deck builder, so you have your deck of cards. You'll be using them to... there's 2 resources, money and attack. Use money to buy new cards, to put them into your deck to make them better. You can buy coordinate cards, which you can play on other players' turns to assist them. But every turn, a bad card comes out, and it moves slowly towards the area where you have to deal with it. So that I always like to make a little boop noise every time it moves, just boop, 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 boop. And then when it gets into the main area, it's like, that's in the room, man. And that's the only way to play Legendary Encounters Alien. But before it gets in there, you can scan different rooms using your attack value to flip them over, and if it's an alien, you'll be able to attack it before it gets to you, and if it's one of the objectives for the story, or a hazard, or an event. Whatever you reveal does something that progresses the story. So the heart of it is the deck building and the being able to buy upgraded cards. You have abilities that trigger off different icons on cards that you play, or abilities that can work with, I say, other players. The base game, I think, has all 4 Alien films in it. And so you've got the different characters from each film, which make up the deck that you can buy. And then the different story makes up the encounter deck as bad things come out. You play as a certain character. You've got a special, not a named character, not a film character, but android. You can play as Wayland Yutani if you want. Gives you a special card into your deck, but your avatar has certain hit points, and if you go over that, then the alien wins. And then the expansions introduce the Alien Queen, which lets players play as the Queen. And then you've got the Prometheus, what's the other one? Covenant. Expansions that introduces those other films as well. There's no Alien versus Predator movies.
Oh, really? It went up to Covenant.
Pardon?
Yeah, I'm surprised they went as far as Covenant.
Well, now they don't seem... I don't believe they have the license now to do a Romulus, but that's also good because my box is full. It is literally jam-packed. There is no room for any more cards in there. But you can combine this with Predator. You can theoretically combine it with Firefly and Matrix and X-Files. I think a good X-Files Alien one might be worthwhile. But I always wanted to see them go into RoboCop and Terminator and Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I don't know if the Ghostbusters would do very well against the Alien.
You don't know that. It's a very good deck builder, and it's a very good cooperative deck builder. The story it tells isn't amazing as such because it's just really revealing cards. So, and they're going to come out in a random order. And the game doesn't tell you, the first time you play, there's an objective that you don't know how to meet. And you just got to keep revealing cards until it happens. But then in subsequent playthroughs, you're like, okay, I need to get through the deck to find the objectives. And that was the only kind of downside to it, I would say. But no, it's a fun game. The expansions add a lot. I wouldn't necessarily play with the Queen, to be honest. She's a bit overpowered, but in what's already a hard game.
Yeah, I've not really played much Legendary Encounters, having only played the Predator one, and I didn't have the best of time with it. But I only played it the once, so I'd be certainly happy to revisit these. And I do enjoy deck building, so...
Predator has movies 1 and 2, Predator 1 and 2, but it has a much greater emphasis on the competitive game where you can play as predators attacking each other.
Oh, I haven't tried that.
Or alternatively, trying to get the best trophies. So there's a couple of different game modes in that one that aren't just the story.
Right, I've only done that story one.
Right.
And I don't know if it was Predator 1 or 2 that we did. I think it was Predator 2. 1. I think it was 1 because we had to get to the job.
It's classic.
But speaking of aliens and space, I've also been doing an aliens and space game, but this is quite different. I played the Ark's Blighted Reach campaign. And this is a really big box expansion for Arks. It's twice the size of core Arks. And it turns what is a sort of a quick 4-player argy-bargy conflict game with restricted actions and the decline of civilizations into an all-day space opera about the rise and fall of empires in which everything is tradable in a market. Almost everything. I played Arks a bunch more times. I continue to really enjoy Arks. I actually brought it with me to Airecon. I didn't get to play it, but there were people just shouting up going, "Does anyone have a copy of Arks we can play?" So I loaned it out to people just so they could play. It really has sort of entered into the hobby community and established itself there, which is always really nice when a game does that because it becomes very easy to get to the table and very often you don't have to teach it, which I appreciate. It's nice when it's a game you really want to play and you're excited about playing. And I've enjoyed all of my playthroughs of Arks. Now, heavily caveated with the fact that Arks is quite a sort of a tactical game. It's hard to sort of imagine what might happen between your turns. The board state can change drastically. You can be quite restricted about the actions in your hand. Knowing when to do things at the right moment is hugely important. And if you find arcs difficult to intuit, then you can be left feeling as though it is a game in which you have no agency and no control and no ability to affect the game state. I don't think that that's always true. It's just that the only way to really understand what's going on is to know all the cards in everyone's hands, and you can't know that. Mm-hmm. So you really are very much at the sort of the mercy of unpredictable forces. And if that doesn't sound like fun to you, then I think you'll find arcs very not your thing. But I really enjoy tactical games, and I'm using tactical as a term here to mean sort of opportunism, looking for the correct move in a sea of chaos, rather than sort of strategy, which I would use as a term to mean sort of longer term planning. You can have strategy in arcs. It's probably important to have some sort of scope, but I think, a lot of the games of arcs that I've won, I've had almost nothing at the end. I've lost everything in pursuit of points, but I've come out on top. So arcs, very strange game, but really interesting, and I'm keen to play more of it. Even now that I've done Blighted Reach, I'd love to go back to base arcs and play more of that. Blighted Reach does not replace arcs. It's 4 games. It's 3 games. It's 3 games of arcs. You can save the game between games. We didn't. We decided to do it all in one day, and it took 12 hours. Not one game of Blighted Reach is mechanically as long as arcs, in that base arcs can be up to 5 chapters. It rarely gets to 5 chapters. Usually someone hits the points threshold before that, but you can get to 5 chapters in arcs, theoretically. In Blighted Reach, you play a 3-chapter game. That's called Act 1. Act 2 is another 3-chapter game. And then Act 3 is a 4-chapter game. Each game is theoretically mechanically shorter, but actually about twice the length of regular arcs, because it adds 2 major things. But what you're doing in the Blighted Reach, the best way to sort of describe this is that you are all taking on roles in a sort of a pre-established empire. So you come into this as a collective of alien races, and your race is, what you look like, how you function is evoked by the Kyle Farron art, but not critical, right? Because what's actually determining this is what's called your fate card. And this is who you are and what you're trying to do. And the way the campaign is sort of managed over the course of the 3 games is these fate cards are really important. Because I talked about the sort of the ramifications of the sort of overarching narrative in Divinus being opaque and confusing and not feeling like the scoring is really tied into that. In arcs, it's done really well. Because the way it works is you start with this fate card, and that's who you are in game 1. Going into game 2, you can keep your fate card if you completed your objectives of game 1. So you've sort of successfully done this fate's objectives, and let's take, for example, my fate from the game I played, where I was the admiral of the Imperial fleet. And my objective was to bolster the Imperial fleet and build more ships, And had I been successful at that, going into game 2, I would have had a choice. I could continue to be the admiral, and my objective would change for game 2, but I'd still be focused on bolstering the Imperial fleet or using the ships for my own agenda or something like that. And you're given also a B fate card, a secondary fate card that comes out in game 2. And then you can pivot your fate. And this is sort of like a shift, I guess, in your narrative, a shift in your story to do something else. If you fail your objectives in game 1, you must change your fate to something else. And so now in game 2, you're doing these same objectives. Or not same objectives, you're doing different objectives, but maybe with the same fate, the same sort of narrative purpose, or maybe something entirely new. And then going into the third game, this happens again. If you had done your objectives again, you can keep the same fate. If you failed your objectives, you must change fate. Regardless, you have the opportunity to change fate if you want. And this works really, really, really well in two ways. One is it creates this really cool narrative. You've got a sense of purpose. You've got a sense of what you're doing. When you change fate, you get to keep some of the passive powers of the earlier fate. So you can sort of build up these strange combos as you change your purpose, but you can also keep your fates, and then you get this really sort of consistent through line narrative. And while you're trying to do these objectives, you also are gaining power, which is the victory points of the game. But the objectives don't give you power. A lot of the objectives require you to do things that also give you power, like, win ambitions, just like in the core game. In the base game, you've got these 5 criteria that you have to switch on, and then you have to win the criteria. So it might be who holds the most, material goods. That's called Tycoon, have the most stuff. And if someone switches on Tycoon at the end of the round, at the end of the chapter, we'll check who has the most stuff and award points to them. And so, you might have an objective that's like, do these things while you're winning Tycoon. So in order to do that objective, first you have to switch on Tycoon. Then you have to be winning it. Now you have to do something else. So they're quite difficult to manifest, these objectives, but they're really thematically tied into what you're trying to do. And really, I think in games 1 and 2 specifically, actually doing the objective is more important than earning points, but you will also be getting points. But you don't win game 1 and then you've just won it. Simultaneously, winning game 1 is helpful because the power you earn carries over game to game. And if you don't complete your objective, you'll also suffer a penalty to your power. And at the end of the whole thing, whoever has the most power is going to win. Unless you pivoted to a Fate C, so the third Fate card. So you failed your objectives in game 1, you failed your objectives in game 2, so you've pivoted to a C Fate card for game 3. You can also have just chosen to move to a Fate C card for game 3. Mm-hmm. The Fate C cards don't care about power at all. All they care about is that you complete the objective. So they'll give you some really difficult objective to do, but if you do it, you just win, which is awesome. So It's like you've just got this sort of really cool emerging sort of narrative. Like I was the admirals in the first game, and then I failed my objectives and the Imperial fleet started to fall apart. One of the other players was building a rival empire called the Commonwealth, which was like a sort of a socialist movement. And they were pulling people out of the empire to be a part of that. But the remnants of the empire remained. And so going into game 2, I had to choose a different fate. And I got dealt these 2 cards, the Hegemony, where I went sort of all out military, or the Pacifists. So I give up the capacity to score the Warlord and Tyrant objectives, which are about destroying enemy pieces and capturing them, and instead focus really hard on one scoring criteria called Empath. And so my job is to go around giving empathy to people, which is psionics, actually. Psionics score the empathy criteria. But I have to distribute this psionics resource around space. And it was really neat because I kept over this Imperial officer's card from the first game because I'd been the Admiral. So I was sort of like, it was almost like after the fall of the Empire or the diminishing of its influence thanks to the rise of the Commonwealth, the remaining Imperial armada decided to go out on a mission of peace and try to bring peace to the Reach. And it's just, it's really neat how these different fates come together to create this emerging narrative. It was, it's a really long experience. I think it was both good to have it all in one because we really got to see the whole arc of this amazing story come out. But after 12 hours, we were like, that was a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and going into the third game as well, like I'd sort of messed up. Actually, it wasn't even messed up, but the way that the game had changed in response to the fates that people had chosen and the way that impacted the rules, like it had sort of really fundamentally changed the way the game worked. And actually achieving my objectives in the third age were really, really, or my what are called ambitions, actually. You have personal ambitions, and you really want to try to do them both. And achieving mine were really difficult, thanks to the way the game state had changed. But also, up until that point, I'd accrued a lot of power. So I had quite a strong lead going into Game 3. And so it all shook out to be pretty competitive. But also I felt like in that game, I was really just trying to like not get left behind. And there were turns where I was like, I can't do anything to further my own sort of game state here, which I think could have been really frustrating, because it's like, oh, look, I've got the final chapter, you know, you've got your 6 action cards. And I was looking at that hand going, I can't do anything with this. I think I've lost this game. I think this whole chapter's a write-off. And that was largely correct. I was just trying to sort of play for time and not fall behind. But simultaneously, I was so invested in the story and what was going on at that point. Like, I mean, it's still hugely competitive and really intense, and you do need to pay attention the whole time, even when you can't do anything. Really, what you can do is kind of drop the ball and give a lot away. So you still need to like sort of be trying not to let that happen. But I was so invested in the game, I didn't really mind. And I, you know, almost kind of accepted that I'd lost. And then one of the other players made a big mistake and I won. So, you know, I guess it's good not to give up.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely incredible experience. Totally mad. I would definitely recommend it to anyone that wants like a full day of emergent narrative wargaming. But it's super intense, and you can definitely save it between games, which might be the more sensible approach.
This over, I mean, I know they're not the same game, but I'm going to be spending all day in space. I normally go Twilight Imperium.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point. And Twilight Imperium feels a lot more like one of those sort of classic marshalling forces on a map war games. You know, you've got armies, you're developing technologies to improve those armies. They're moving around a board, their movement is controlled and restricted, and they're going to engage in dicey combat when they do engage in combat. And it has a lot of the sort of the same elements that go with that, you know, like player elimination. I mean, I know it's very difficult to get eliminated in Twilight Imperium, but it can happen theoretically, at least. And it's got kingmaking. Often the first one to pick a fight leaves themselves open to a counterattack that can take them far back in the game. So I mean, it's a very sort of different experience, because the Blighted Reach, it doesn't feel like, I mean, it does have dice-driven combat, and it does have spaceships on a map, so you would think that it would feel like a sort of an apt comparison. But you're rarely, I mean, and you know, the warlord ambition wants you to kill enemy ships. So having a pool of enemy ships in your trophies area, these are the things you've killed, can be useful. But it feels like the chief concern of ARCs is more on the sort of, it's smaller scope. It feels like less grand. You know, the empires in ARCs feel like they're just kind of ticking along, and the combat, the conflict feels like, you know, much higher. I don't want to say higher stakes, but like, you know, it just feels dark because it's so hard to build things and so easy to destroy them. You'll never have a massive army in ARCs. If you get 6 ships, that's amazing. But it feels more about the sort of the narrative arc of these empires over the course of the 3 games. Like, I don't think that you see an emergent story in Twilight Imperium in very much the same way.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can, to an extent. You know, there are different factions in Twilight Imperium, and they've all got different ways of playing and different sort of things that they're pursuing. But what doesn't really happen in Twilight Imperium is this sort of unexpected interworking of the mechanisms of the fates, right? Because like you've got the asymmetrical factions, but the asymmetry is embedded from the start, and that doesn't change, right? Like if we set up the same slices and the same empires and the same players, you know, the game might play out differently, but at least all the rules of that game would be the same. And I think the big variable would be the what's it called, the politics deck, you know, and the politics we see coming up.
Yeah, the agendas and.
But like the fates in Arcs and the different configuration of them, and like the fact that I was the Admiralty and then became the Pacifist, but as the Pacifist I was still in charge of the Empire's fleets, is wild. Like, it's just so significant. And every player's fate had such a massive impact on the rules of the game and made them a very unique configuration that feels like it would be almost impossible to replicate. And who fails and whether people decide to change even if they succeed and things like that but it feels more like a sort of this emergent story. Whereas I feel like in Twilight, I'm more focused on warring and establishing power in a very sort of classic imperialist kind of way.
That makes sense. Well, I mean, I will get to play Arcs at some point, but not happened yet.
Well, I highly recommend 2 or 3 games of Arcs before the Blighted Reach if you're so inclined to play.
Jump in the deep end.
Yeah, no, I would definitely not recommend jumping straight into Blighted Reach. It's, you know, I mean, Arcs itself is a bit inscrutable, and with all the extra stuff Blighted Reach adds on top. And to an extent, I actually got easy mode as well, because being in charge of the Imperial fleet meant I could treat all their ships as my own, which is so nice because I could just ignore all of the movement rules that happened with the Empire's fleet. And at some point in Game 3, I finally reneged on the Empire and lost the command of the Imperial officers. And then I had to suddenly remember all these rules I hadn't been playing with for like 8 hours. And I was like, oh my god. I should have just stayed in the Empire. But the primary game time added to Arcs comes from the concept of these things called summits, because when they will trigger in a given hand of cards. You can have multiple summits in a chapter. You can have up to 4 summits in a chapter, and then the summits are very like sort of Cold War-y John Company, where it's like a lot of things are tradable, and you can give away these favor tokens that can just be forcibly traded in for promises in the future. So it's also very tense, and towards the end of the game, very often people are just like, I'm not calling a summit, we're not having the summit, I'm not doing it, you know, because it's scary, and you don't know what favors people are going to call in, and also they take quite a lot of time, like they add a lot of time to the game as well. So that's primarily where I think the game time comes from in Arcs, in Blighted Reach, actually. That and all the extra rules that are only revealed upon start. But I think if you're into this sort of thing, if all of that sounds tempting to you, this is quite a singular experience. And, you know, I think there's something there for people who really like sort of tactical games. I think it adds a lot of strategy, because what you can be doing is, if you think you're going to make your objectives this round, you can start planning for your objectives in the next game as well, because the board state sort of has this intermission where parts of it reset and a lot of it is maintained. So you can plan for that in Game 2, how you're going to go into that with an advantage. So it adds a lot more strategy to what is otherwise a very tactical game. And then there's this really sort of strong sense of narrative and the rise and fall of sort of empires and their goals. So I think there's something there for everybody, but it's, you know, it's a pretty intense and complicated game.
Nice. Well, that's pretty much it for me.
Yep, likewise. That's it from me. So we can. I've apparently only been playing really long campaign games this week. So that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I definitely played other stuff, but it was already too much. I'll have to sneak them into next episode.
Well, I'm very excited for when you finally get a chance to play Arcs and we can have a chat about that. But
and Jest of Robin Hood at some point, I hope.
Oh God, yeah. I'm hoping we can discuss that in short order as well. You gotta go find your friends and corral them, Barry. What's going on?
Yeah, I was offered last week, but I didn't have time.
There's always next week. And we'll be back next week with more... Not next week. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more board gaming chit-chat. But for now, thanks everyone so much for listening. And we'll see you all in the next episode.
Bye!